and Sundays, what steps is the council taking to mitigate impacts on businesses and incentivise visiting our towns?
Thank you, George, for your question. As stated recently in media releases, the council cannot afford to lose an estimated £30,000 in revenue to fund free parking on the 3 Saturdays before Christmas. As local councils across the country struggle, the situation in Wokingham Borough is stark. We receive 30 million less per year than the average local unity authority. That's £400 less per household per year than the average. Considering the council's climate emergency action plan and active travel policy, the council, through funding grants available, will be offering free bus travel on Reading and Thames Valley buses on the 6 Saturdays leading up to Christmas, starting on the 18th of November. In addition, funded through the Economic Development Grant, has enabled free town centre parking on those attending Christmas events in Wokingham, the Winter Carnival on Sunday, 26th of November, and Woodley's Winter Extravaganza on Sunday, the 3rd of December. Also, the free bus travel has been extended to cover each of these events using the Lion 4 and X4 for Wokingham and the Orange 13 and 14 for Woodley. These will help support local traders and the events. Thank you.
Mr. Evans, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I attended a forum last Monday for businesses operating in the town centre. They all said the same thing, that since the rollout of the increased parking charges and chargeable periods, they'd experienced heavy-handed enforcement and significant reductions in footfall and revenue of between 20 and 40%. They're comparing to sister stores in neighbouring towns, and in Wokingham, they are underperforming in recent months. What exercise has the council completed to understand the negative impacts on businesses since the car parking charge increases? What analysis have you carried out to forecast the impact of the measures that you've just mentioned in running up to Christmas? And will you commit to releasing data that the council has on car parking usage, revenue and costs in 2023?
We are currently, thank you for the supplementary. We're currently going through a 3-month review of the car parking since it went up. The off-street car parking report is not quite finished yet, but the data indicate that the overall introduction of the new charges has not seen a negative impact on car parking usage, and footfall has not fallen.
Sorry. Thank you. That concludes the public questions. Mr. Evans, you're welcome to stay with us, or you're welcome to leave, whichever you wish to choose. Thank you. Now we come on to petitions. Does anyone wish to submit a petition? Would you like to speak? You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. I'm presenting this petition because the residents of Meadow Road feel there is a real risk to safety, as well as a general nuisance of fast, reckless and antisocial driving along our road. Meadow Road is a 500-metre long straight residential street and is used as a cut-through connecting Lower Earley and Wokingham Road, which generates a high volume of traffic. This petition has been supported by 98% of the residents in the road. The conversations on the doorsteps raised common concerns. We are fed up with suffering the antics of the boy racers driving at dangerous speeds up our road. We are fed up with the damage to parked cars and property due to reckless driving, and we are fed up with a high level of antisocial driving. The 30-mile-an-hour speed limit along our road is just too high. With Loddon School around the corner, Maiden Early School nearby, and Meadow Park Play Area right beside us, the road has a constant stream of children walking and cycling along and across it. That, together with a relatively high proportion of elderly residents, it is only a matter of time before there is a serious incident, We implore you to take action before this happens. There used to be a speed camera outside number 21, but the upper part was removed after it was accidentally damaged. But the fact that the camera was previously installed is pretty clear evidence that there has been a historic problem with speeding in the road. Assuming the camera base and power supply are still sound, this should significantly reduce the cost of reinstating a camera. We are pleased to see that monitoring strips have recently been installed, but we need to be really careful how that data is interpreted. The strips are close to the side road junctions situated at each end of Meadow Road, so they will not pick up the insane speeds some cars do at the midpoint. And the recent prolonged wet weather and dark nights have also dampened speeds. The residents are therefore petitioning the council to investigate our concerns seriously and address the speeding issue. We wish the council, as a minimum, to consider a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, the reinstatement of the speed camera, and the installation of a speed-sensitive sign with a reminder of the speed limit. All of these should be a relatively low-cost solution that should make a real difference. Some residents have expressed concerns about the environmental and on-street parking impact of other potential types of traffic calming measures, such as chicanes and road bumps. So we therefore request to be kept up to date with the council's findings and consulted before any measures are implemented to make sure that the measures meet our needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for bringing that petition. Could you please hand that to Democratic Services, who will ensure that the petition goes to the correct officer? Are there any more petitions? No, thank you. I want to come on to the outcome of Code of Conduct complaint, and I'm going to read a statement. In accordance with paragraph 9.1.13.3 of the Constitution, there will be no discussion on this item. The nature of the complaint is detailed on the agenda front sheets. The decision notice was published in October 2023 by the monitoring officer in consultation with the chair of Standards Committee as required by the Constitution. Through the inclusion of this item in the agenda and my referencing it in open session, the minutes of the meeting will record that the council has noted the decision. Thank you, and that concludes this item. Moving on, we have a presentation, hopefully, by the Youth Council. I don't know how we do that logistically. Perhaps you can help, Priya?
Do you want to say the names?
Yeah, I'll do that now. So I would like to extend a warm welcome to the members of the Youth Council, Holly McKinnon, Chair of the Youth Council, Annika Dixit, and Presley Shearer, who will be presenting this item. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for letting us have the time on the agenda today to talk to you about Wokingham's Youth Charter. We're really excited to be able to present it with all of you, and we've been working on it for a good few months now. So I'm Holly, I'm the Youth MP for Wokingham and Chair of Wokingham Youth Council, and Anika and Presley have been members of Wokingham Youth Council since it began in July 2021.
So why have we created a youth charter for Wokingham? We have written this charter because, as you know, Wokingham has been described as one of the top places to live in the UK, with a council that consistently listens to residents. Young people are continuing to become more involved in local decision making, and after positive engagement at Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny, as well as the Youth Politics event, Wokingham Youth Council have decided that an important step in encouraging youth voice in Wokingham is to put into writing our ideas to improve the borough. This charter is not a list of complaints. It is a detailed plan to improve the quality of life for young people in the borough. It is a manifesto for change in how young people and adult decision makers can collaborate to create a better Wokingham together. We hope the outcome of this paper is for future consideration as part of the Council's strategic planning.
We asked every youth council member to talk to their peers and find out what they thought were the biggest issues affecting the youth population in the borough. Through this, as well as survey responses across the borough and 2 focus groups held in Embrook and Addington School respectively, we have collated a list of policies. We found that the 3 main groups that can work with us to create meaningful change for young people within Wokingham are the Borough Council, schools, and other organisations. Our policies are categorised based on which group they apply to, and this is stated next to each policy in this presentation.
We appreciate that some policies are much more achievable than others. Many are more ambitious, and a few are long-term projects for the future. And we do have some policies that are currently in review that aren't quite ready to present yet. But that's also part of our hope that we add policies over time as and when we need them to meet the changing needs of Wokingham's youth. We don't expect every policy to be acted upon right away. We just ask that those reading it treat it with the respect it deserves as an articulation of the views of Wokingham's young people. So our first point, consistent interaction between decision makers and young people is crucial for effective youth voice activities. It helps young people to form and express their views and share them to create positive change for themselves and others in the community. Therefore, our first policy is that we propose more consistent youth engagement with local decision makers and young people through Wokingham Council to consult with young people on how they will be affected by strategies implemented in the borough. Our second policy is about volunteering, which is often the first experience of civic engagement for young people, allowing them to contribute to their community and build empathy. However, a significant barrier facing young people when it comes to accessing volunteering and enrichment opportunities is knowing where to find them. So we propose the creation and/or publication of a youth portal or online careers and enrichment platform for all young people in Wokingham with information on local volunteering and enrichment opportunities, youth clubs and careers events. Because we noticed when looking on the Borough Council's website, the current Be Inspired link for volunteering opportunities, it doesn't show any opportunities closer than Egham or Hampshire, which could be difficult for young people in Wokingham when it comes to accessing them. Our third point is on local youth events and summits, and these are opportunities for young people to become engaged in positive action to improve their local community. They create time and space where young people can learn and grow, share their views with decision makers, and become engaged in what matters most to them. So we propose that Wokingham Youth Council continues to facilitate a regular calendar of youth voice events such as mock COPs and panel discussions, such as the successful one in February last year, so that all young people in Wokingham can engage with local politics.
In an age where socialisation is moving increasingly online, it is more important than ever for young people to have access to spaces where they can interact face-to-face outside of an institutional setting. Youth clubs provide a safe space for young people outside of school and often are a source of professional mental health support, such as the former Wokingham Youth Club. So our proposal is that we bring a return of youth clubs across the borough as a necessary step towards fostering a sense of security and community within Wokingham's youth. Many young people with disabilities get to town in a car and use disabled spaces in car parks. However, the allowed time in such parking spaces is often half an hour, which is not long enough, as many young people require around this time just to exit and re-enter the vehicle. Therefore, we propose that disabled parking spaces in Wokingham Borough should have longer time intervals and that more or improved parking facilities are put in town centres or shopping areas. Wokingham is becoming an increasingly diverse borough. There are measures in place to tackle discrimination and inequality. However, the addition of a more celebratory approach to the borough's diversity and culture would be beneficial to residents, businesses, and Wokingham's identity as a whole. We propose the introduction of an annual culture day in Wokingham, including exhibitions, parades, stalls, and talks from local equality, diversity, and inclusion organisations, businesses, and residents who want to participate.
And these last two policies are a focus on improving the environment for young people in the borough. So within Wokingham Borough, there are many rural areas, some of which do not have a nearby train station and have infrequent or inconsistent bus services. Although there are good cycle paths and transport routes around Wokingham town, there are many areas that are not as accessible, particularly in more rural areas, such as Spencer's Wood and Risley, as well as the surrounding the Pigott School and Bohunt School, especially from Early to Twyford, Finchampstead to Arborfield, and other such examples. Therefore, we propose that a greater number of affordable public transport bus routes are introduced across Wokingham Borough, with more affordable bus fares for young people. To improve Wokingham's local environment, there are many small steps that could be taken to make sustainable choices easier for our residents. So our final policy is that one way that we propose is that in heavily pedestrianised areas, the council replaces existing street bins with section street bins, and that more bins are placed around the borough to reduce littering and improve the environment overall. Thank you so much for listening, and please feel free to ask any questions.
Councillor. Councillor Conway, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and thank you very much, Holly and Annika and Presley, for such a really impressive presentation. You've obviously, you and your colleagues in the Youth Council have given enormous thought to all of the recommendations. And if I just may pick up on two, that doesn't mean in any way that I'm not really interested in all of them, but let me just pick up on two. The first one, where you address the need for more consistent engagement between the council and the Youth Council. I'm sure we can commit to that very quickly. And connected with that, you also, one of your recommendations was regularising the kind of event we had in February, where I do recall that Pauline and Andy and I were put through our paces by some fairly rigorous questioning. I think we would be very, very happy to repeat that kind of event on a regular basis, and any others you think that would be interesting to the Youth Council. And I do want to say something, if I may, about how already the Youth Council is playing a significant role in policy formulation in the council. You, I think, have been consulted about our young people's housing strategy, which is coming forward soon. One of your members, Andrew Jones, is actually serving on the steering committee for the Community Vision. Community Vision is an attempt to create a jointly authored set of ambitions that the borough would like to see implemented in the next few years. And this is going to inform the council's own strategy and plans. So one of your colleagues is playing a direct role in that work. And that, I think, is the kind of thing we're very keen to see replicated in lots of other areas. So I can make the commitment, I think, on behalf of the council, that we want to engage with you. We will engage with you. And we look forward to really fruitful outcomes from that engagement. So thank you again very much indeed. Thank you.
Councillor Keith Baker, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Very interesting presentation, and the timing is perfect. And let me explain why. I'm going to take my borough hat off, and I'm going to put my town council hat on. I'm leader of Woodley Town Council, and we are in the process of putting together a youth strategy. We already have a committee called the Community Youth Partnership, which is driven not by councillors. Councillors are on it, but it's driven by organisations, churches, schools, football clubs. I would like to extend an invitation to the Youth Council to be one of those members on the Community Youth Partnership. Your insight, because you're young, will be absolutely essential, because a lot of the people sitting around that table are people like me, old farts. I'm 72 years old. What do I know about the youth? But you do. So I hope you will take me up on that offer. We've got a working party, as I said, to put together a youth strategy for Woodley. Okay. And there is a reasonable amount of funds behind it. Nowhere near as much as the borough can do, but we're doing our bit. And they are meeting to try and thrash out what the strategy should be for Woodley, for the youth of Woodley, including youth clubs. So that's why I say the timing is perfect. So again, I would like to invite you, one of you, to come on and be the voice of the youth on that strategy. And I hope you will take me up on that. And just for one thing, whenever you just say Wokingham Youth Council, people like me think, well, hang on, we're more than Wokingham. We're Woodley, we're Early, etc. But that's just a textual thing. Thank you very much.
Yes, of course you can respond.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for the invitation, and also in response to Councillor Conway's comments. Of course, we're so grateful for all the provisions that are already in place and this opportunity. And yeah, we're really looking forward to working with you to extend what's already in place. But yeah, I just wanted to say that.
Next question is Councillor Andrew Mickleborough.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And thank you, Holly, Annika and Presley for attending tonight and for your wonderful presentation. Please also pass on all councillors' thanks, sincere thanks, to all members of the Youth Council for the important work that you do, including the Youth Charter, which is really thoughtful, is very carefully crafted, but equally and most importantly, it's really practical, and it's a call for action. And I like that. I'm going to come back to, but that leads me to another point. Okay. I did like very much the reference to some very specific proposals, such as the idea of a culture day. Some of the proposals that you mentioned with regards to travel and active travel and so forth. And I really look forward to inviting the Youth Council back again to our Overview and Scrutiny Committee, where we can sit down together again and monitor progress on each of these ideas that you have presented. Now, Councillor Baker has given you an invitation, another way of getting involved in and getting the youth voice. I'd like to add another invitation. I was wondering if our Youth Council is aware of what could be a really, really great opportunity to broaden your interaction with others and increase your impacts locally, but also nationally. And specifically, I've been really impressed with some of the information that I've read about the British Youth Council. The British Youth Council is a national network of almost 200 youth-focused organisations, including some youth councils, working to empower young people to be involved in decision-making and taking action, and to develop yourselves as leaders and advocates. And I'm sure, and I know this because you've demonstrated it yet again tonight, that our Youth Council, your Youth Council, can use its experience to contribute massively if you choose to join the British Youth Council, and that membership would bring benefits locally. Is this membership something that has already been explored by the Youth Council? And if not, whether the Youth Council might wish to explore possible membership?
Thank you very much for your kind comments on the Charter. In regards to the British Youth Council, we're a member, so the Secondary Federation pay for our membership, and myself and another member, we were able to attend the Youth Con that was contributing to the UK Youth Parliament's Food for Learning Bill, which we're actually debating in the House of Commons tomorrow. But yeah, I completely agree with you. It's a brilliant opportunity. But something we could do potentially is advertise that to more of Wokingham's young people so that it's more accessible. But yeah, thank you.
Councillor Prubray.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. So I'm the lead for Children's Services on the council. I think I was at the committee where you came and spoke to everybody in scrutiny. And I know that your charter will be circulated to all the councillors after this meeting so that everybody has a copy of it. I'd like to thank you very much for it. But I do have a question for you. And my question for you is, when are you going to invite me to come and talk to the Youth Council? Because I would be delighted to do that. Thank you.
You're welcome to our next meeting if you'd like. Yeah, just reach out to us, and we'd love to have you. And that goes for any other councillor. If you ever want to speak at the Youth Council, that would be brilliant. But yeah, thank you.
If there's no further questions, I would like to say a huge thank you from the Deputy Mayor to Holly and Annika and Presley for a fantastic presentation. Well done. And your answers to the questions were better than mine usually. So would you like to stay, or would you like to retire to it's up to you.
Give them a round of applause.
But before you go, let's give them a quick round of applause. Right, the next item is a presentation from Thames Valley Police. I don't often talk to policemen, but I will have to in this case, because I would very gratefully ask you to try to stick to the timings, because we've got a load of other business to do after you've gone through your important business. So I think, I would like to extend a warm welcome to the Chief Constable, Jason Hogg, and Matthew Barber, the Police and Crime Commissioner, who will be jointly presenting this item. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for welcoming us along this evening. I will kick off. I'll try and keep my comments relatively brief because the Chief Constable has a much more interesting PowerPoint, which is about the operational things that are going on in Wokingham, which members are generally more interested in. But I want to touch on a few things that we're doing force-wide, which I think are relevant. One, actually, to pick up on some of the comments that we just heard from the Youth Council. I was with Number 5 Young People in Reading. It's a charity that offers counselling services to people across the RG postcode. So they support young people down here in Wokingham. I was talking to them just last week about exactly how we can involve young people within some of the independent advisory groups that we have within policing. We're doing a review at the moment jointly between myself and the Chief Constable of those sort of partnership governance arrangements, and definitely trying to recruit more young people to be part of those bodies is definitely an important piece of work. And one of those areas that affects young people more than most is about knife crime. And you'll hear some operational updates on what's being done. But I wanted to touch on it particularly at the moment because we're going through a week of action known as OPSEPTA this week, a national week of action to deal with knife crime. We've made some really good progress in Thames Valley. In the last 12 months, I think knife crime overall is down about 4%. That's a really good news. And the reality is that knife crime is objectively low. Violent crime is one of the lowest in the country in Thames Valley. It fluctuates, but depending on which month you look at, we have the lowest levels of violent crime of any police force anywhere. But I spent far too much time talking to parents of children, and it is often children who've lost their lives as a result of knife crime. So it's a hugely important area, even though the risk is still relatively low. We need to keep that in proportion. One of the things that the force have done, and I've pushed very hard for over the last 12, 18 months, is what's known as OpDeter, which is a much tougher approach to dealing with those in possession of knives. If you go back a couple of years, as is still the case in some forces elsewhere in the country, actually, the approach to dealing with people just in possession of a weapon was relatively minimal. You would be arrested, but you would very likely be released under investigation, and there would be a long, slow process for the criminal justice system. That's been changed. In the majority of cases now, someone in Thames Valley will be arrested, they'll be taken into custody, they'll be charged, remanded overnight and in front of the magistrates the next day. And that is starting to have an impact, not just on demonstrating there's a swift police response, but it's starting to have an impact in the courts, where we're starting to see some much better sentencing as a result of that. But there is a youth element to it as well. So I funded in Milton Keynes as a starting point for a pilot, and we got additional funding for Slough from the Home Office to speed up the youth intervention. So you will have through your youth offending team in Wokingham interventions that you'll be working with young people who are involved in violent crime, but those can often take weeks or months to come into place. So what we've done elsewhere is to fund a really early intervention, so that within 90 minutes of someone in custody being brought into custody, you will have the youth worker from the youth offending team there offering those interventions straight away. And funnily enough, you get a much better chance of engagement when someone you've literally got that captive audience where they're not sure whether they're going to be charged with an offence and they're in a police cell, than you do 3 weeks after an event has taken place and that young person feels they may have got away with it, and they stick two fingers up, either proverbially or literally, to that youth worker. I'm hoping that over the next month, the next year, we can roll that out across the whole of Thames Valley, working with your youth offending team to make sure that we have that available at Loddon Valley. That will need some coordination across Berkshire. So there will be an appeal coming to you as a council to say, actually, local government needs to work out how that's going to work, given the complex nature of local government in Berkshire, so that we make sure that funding works fairly across local authorities to support all young people. I want to touch briefly on the Crime Fighters Plan, which was launched jointly with the Chief Constable earlier this year, which is about improving public contact, making sure people can get through quicker on 101, but also opening up new channels of online reporting to make it easier for the public to not just report crime, but to report intelligence, that really valuable stuff that people will often talk about in their local Facebook groups, raising concerns about things they may have seen here or there, but often don't report to the police. And that's exactly the intelligence that local policing needs. With the increase in police officers we've had, I know we've got some questions on this later, but in terms of headcount, at the end of the last financial year, we had 5,034 police officers in Thames Valley. That's a record number. If you look at the numbers, I'm sure would be in the Chief's presentation, we look at full-time equivalents, the absolute number is slightly lower, but we're still at those record numbers. And I'm looking to make sure that we have the resources for the Chief Constable to deploy more of those officers into neighbourhood policing over this coming year. That really matters to the public, but it really matters to the wider strategy of making sure that we can get into that world of prevention. There is an awful lot of effort by a lot of very good police officers in Thames Valley at the moment dealing with offences that are being reported. We need to try and get upstream of that. Of course, policing is a complicated world. You can't ever have that opportunity to put your foot on the ball and give yourself that time that you may wish, but that's a really important aim, that we get to that point of prevention, using that increased community intelligence, having those officers in the right place and seeking to prevent crime rather than simply arresting our way out of problems. A particular issue at the moment for me is retail crime, and I was in Birmingham today giving a speech to a national conference of retailers on what I think we can do in Thames Valley. I hope we can make Thames Valley the best force in the country for dealing with retail crime, and there are some relatively easy steps that we can take. We are, through my office, I have just procured a system called DISC. Now that's in operation in parts of Wokingham, and I've been talking to some traders in Wokingham town itself about their use of DISC, but I want to make that free at the point of use for all retailers across the whole of Thames Valley. That allows them to report more easily to the police and again to share intelligence with local officers. The force are implementing some new patrol strategies to make sure that we're able to deal with retail crime more effectively. and a genuine partnership being built between local and national retailers to make sure that we have all of those links between policing and retailers. We sometimes go into a downward spiral of people not wanting to report because they think the police won't deal with those issues. We need to break that cycle, and I've had lots of conversations with national retailers such as Next and Asda and Tesco's about some of the things we can do with them, probably starting next month and working into the new year, which very happy to go into a bit later if you have more time. One final bit from me, which I think affects all areas across Berkshire particularly, is around family drug and alcohol courts. Now, this is where my role goes sort of beyond pure policing into the wider criminal justice sphere. But I'm a big fan of FDACs as they're known. They can have a real impact on both policing by reducing demand, but also on reducing demand on local authorities. So family drug and alcohol courts are part of the family courts where judges will focus particularly on issues of drugs and alcohol, as it suggests, but also almost all of those cases involve some element of domestic abuse. And they work really intensively using the powers that the judiciary have to make sure that they reduce reoffending, they keep families together. And the outcomes for these are fantastic. They are about 4 times more likely to keep children with their parents. Now, that has a real world benefit, clearly, for those children and families. It has an impact on policing, but it also has an impact on you as a local authority who will be dealing with those care proceedings. So I think all local authorities in Berkshire have shown an interest in this, but it's difficult to get it up and running. So I put in the funding for a project manager, effectively, who will be supplied by the FDAC system nationally, who will help to work through with local authorities how we can get that in place for Berkshire and indeed Oxfordshire as well, because we've got one running in Buckinghamshire and Milton Keynes. It works really well, and I think if anything we can do around there, again, it's about that world of prevention. It's about dealing with those who are most at risk and making sure that they are protected. I'm very conscious of time, which I'm probably overrunning because I do want to leave time for the Chief. There's lots of other things I could talk about in terms of victim services and the community fund and violence reduction, but I will happily save those for questions and hand over to Jason Hogg.
Thank you, Matthew. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Jason Hogg. I'm the Chief Constable of Thames Valley Police, and it's a great pleasure to be here to meet you and speak to you today. What I'm going to do for the next 10 minutes is give a high-level overview of Thames Valley Police, your local police force. I appreciate it. I did a bit of checking, and a number of new councillors over the last year who might not know a little bit about the force that looks after you. Secondly, I'm going to talk briefly about our force restructure, which will impact all local authorities across the Thames Valley. Talk about right care, right person, which is new approach to mental health, because I get asked that more about right care, right person more than anything else when I speak to local partners at the moment, and some high-level performance data in 10 minutes, which is a lot to get through. So I'll be very quick, and then hand over to Andy, who's your local policing commander for Wokingham and Bracknell as well, to talk some more detail about specifically local crime trends locally. So Thames Valley Police, we're the 5th biggest police force in the country. We're a very big organisation. We of the areas of growth in the 2021 census, 8 of the top 10 are in the Thames Valley. So we're growing more than ever before. We're very diverse players, 150 languages spoken here. We also host the regional organised crime unit and counter-terrorism unit. And the counter-terrorism unit, for example, led the Salisbury attack in just a few years ago. So we have a very big detective presence as well. We have more motorway network than any police force in the country, and through our collaborated work with Hampshire, we have the biggest firearms team outside of the Metropolitan Police. So we're a rural force and an urban force, but the structure is we are similar to a big, large metropolitan force. In terms of I've been very blessed since I become Chief Constable. Matthew appointed me in April. Next slide. A new team and attract new talent to Thames Valley. In terms of people on the screen there, the ones you're likely to see and have contact with most of all are Christian Bunt. Christian's my Assistant Chief Constable for local policing, looks after all the local policing areas. He's Andy's boss, effectively. And Katie is my lead for criminal justice, anything to do with child safeguarding, partnership working to do with vulnerability. Katie will be the point of contact, and many of you may have met her. In terms of our people, If you watch some of these crime dramas on the television, it does frustrate me that it looks like all police officers are men, and it's just not the case. 48% of my workforce are women. I have a workforce of 8,400 officers, staff, volunteers, and special constables. Of all our new recruits coming through the door at the moment, police officers, 45% are female, which is the highest number in the history of Thames Valley Police. 16 to 18% of our new recruits are from our Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities, which again, higher than ever before. Normally in the past 20 years, it's been 5%, and we're working incredibly hard to attract those from our underrepresented groups to come and work for us. You'll see a number on the screen there. We have 191 specials. Matthew has funded a small team. I really wanted, as part of the launch of Matthew's Crime Fighters plan and commitment to neighbourhood policing, to have more special constables and volunteers. So we're hoping to have another 300 special constables coming working with us, based in our local communities, providing that visible presence. For the last year, next slide please, we have been reviewing our force structures, and there's a number of reasons for that. We face a number of demands in policing as a public sector organisation. Demand is ever increasing with the resources we have available. Just since April, 999 calls have increased by 16% just since April. So we have more and more people ringing us, and recorded crime continues to increase. And many of the cases we deal with, there's more vulnerability, more complexity than ever before. And like many public sector organisations, I have a workforce which is overstretched and is often exhausted. Secondly, I have some challenges around retention. Obviously, Berkshire and Wokingham is a lovely area to live, as the youth council members commented on. But we are 41 out of 43 of forces in terms of worst for retention. And we do lose a lot of people, unfortunately. We have some remarkable people working for us, but the job is difficult. And 65% of my frontline teams have less than 2 years service. So retention is a real issue I'm grappling with. And then we start this work in order to try to manage our demand and restructure our force to manage demand more effectively. Since then, since the war in Ukraine and increases inflation, we've got budgetary pressures in the same way any public sector organisation and local authority will have. And I have a £20 million deficit, which is the equivalent of 400 police officers out of the budget. I don't want to reduce by any police officers. Therefore, what effectively I'm doing with the restructure is moving from 11/12 local policing area command teams down to 5 areas, with putting and through investment doubling the number of neighbourhood officers in our streets, but significant reductions in our management overhead in terms of having bigger teams, which will be able to surge capacity. Where there's a problem, a neighbourhood problem, there's a bigger team to surge demand and solve that problem as well. In terms of what that is going to achieve, it's mentioned there, schools officers. We're doubling the number of schools officers as well, and much more greater use in terms of more officers on domestic abuse units and child abuse units as well. If we just move on to right person, please. So this is a new protocol being signed between the National Police Chief Council, the Home Office, Department of Health and Social Care, and NHS England. And I do mention this because there has been some talk in the press, and my colleague Sir Mark Rowley in the Metropolitan Police did launch in the press a date by which the police officers in London would no longer support partners dealing with mental health issues. And I was contacted by my many partners saying, are you going to do the same thing in Thames Valley Police? And to provide some reassurance, we're absolutely not going to do that. And we have a strategic mental health board that has been in place for 18 months now. We are taking Right Care, Right Person on board, and we're an earlier adopter of force. But clearly dealing with the issue of mental health is a societal problem, and no one agency can do it on their own. And the assurance I've given to colleagues in health, and particularly the ambulance, if somebody is where a crime's committed, if there's immediate threat to life, or there's threat of violence to any of our public sector workers, we will be there and the police will deploy. But unfortunately, there are many cases where we are the first agency of first resort, and our officers attend somebody where no crime has been committed and there's somebody having a mental health episode and is ill. So since May, we've trained our control room staff not to deploy to certain jobs, mainly where there's a concern for safety. Somebody walks out of a hospital, for example, without receiving treatment. In the past, we've dealt with all those as missing people. We no longer do that. So since May, we've seen a 26% reduction of the number of mentally ill people arrested under the Mental Health Act. And I think that's a good thing, because people who were detained under the Mental Health Act taken to police stations often, and these are ill people who haven't committed any crime. So we're working very, very closely with health partners. But the message is we absolutely want to work hand in hand with our local partners to make sure we provide a good service and keep our public safe. So finally then, just some statistics for you in terms of those of you who maybe you're on social media, you might watch social media or some of the posts people put on there, and it feels like it's a society in a world we're going to hell in a handcart. But it's simply not the case. And certainly what we need in our public services at the moment is an optimistic leadership. And I'm getting quite tired of people talking down our public services in our country. We have amazing men and women doing some quite remarkable things in my organisation. And the reality is we're doing a lot of really good work. And Matthew touched on knife crime. And the priority for Thames Valley Police last year was reducing the number of homicides, driving down knife crime, and improving our response to violence against women and girls. And they were the first priorities. And as Andy's your local commander, that pressure I put on him and all the commanders. And we've made some real improvements and we've been identified as good practice, haven't we, Matthew, in the last couple of weeks? We've reduced homicide by 44% in 1 year. And that is because the pandemic we had of young men killing young men on our streets across the Thames Valley with significant reductions. We've seen a 27% increase in 1 year in the number of domestic abuse cases where we prosecuted. And despite making a record number of arrests in our force, nearly a third of all our arrests were domestic abuse, and we have a real commitment with regard to that as well. And violence against women and girls as a whole, including when you include rape and sexual offences in there, again, a 17% rise in the number of offences we've prosecuted. We have made some real progress, but we've got some gaps, and one of which is shoplifting. And Matthew's challenged me as a elected representative, as me the Chief Constable, and I do have full operational accountability, and I can make the operational decisions. But Matthew has given me the challenge that our response to shoplifting is not as good as he wants to be, and some of the feedback he has got. And I'm absolutely committed to that. We were launching a new approach in December, and already, and just today I was in Loddon Valley Police Station and seeing some of Andy's teams already today. There was some real success today, Andy, with prolific shoplifting, nearly 50 offences detected today. So that is our next real challenge, and you will see and feel that difference in your communities. Those of you particularly have those, if you like, one-stop shops or budgeons or whatever it might be, certainly, which are the centre of our communities. And certainly what Matthew, I think would say, unless we tackle those shoplifting issues, often associated with antisocial behaviour, it almost creates a sense of lawlessness in our communities if the police don't do anything about that. So we're absolutely committed, and you will see some significant improvements in the next 4 weeks already, and beyond Christmas as well. So I pause there, but please, I do come back and ask Matthew, Andy, or any questions on anything we said or anything else.
Well, thank you, sir. Just check how long I have. Is it till past? Okay, I'll probably drop some of this out because some of the details in there. So, hello, I'm Andy Cranage. I'm the area commander for Bracknell and Wokingham. So I have 2 areas to look after. What I'll talk about tonight will be about Wokingham. So, but what we've got on the next slide, if you could please, is just some of the key areas of activity that's happened across the LPA and especially in and around Wokingham. It talks here about our crime, the amount of crime that's happened in the last year. It's year to date, as it were, a year. From last year to today, essentially, you see those 8,500 crimes there. Probably what I'll just talk about here is around domestic abuse and the link into the violence with injury here. Domestic abuse, as already has been mentioned, is a real key area of business for policing in Bracknell and Wokingham area. And as you see, when you add up the violence with injury and the domestic abuse, it forms a great deal, a high percentage of the crimes that happen locally here. They're challenging within the home, often one person's word against another, which is where it's crucial we work with the likes of other organisations and our community safety partnership around how we can keep people safe, because prosecuting people is only one arm of how we can help people that suffer domestic abuse.
So some real good work that goes on in and around that area. I'll touch on burglary on the next slide, and I think I'll just highlight, as the chief has mentioned, around knife crime, our reductions we've had, because it's been a real focus in the last year. Very much we're moving here in Wokingham to how we do prevention, getting early with people into the schools, etc. And I mentioned something about Positive Choices workshop that's been happening this week shortly, and some of you may have seen on the television tonight. Sexual offences, again, that's really a lot where our violence against women and girls work takes place, as well as in the home, domestic abuse. And again, we're seeing some reductions in that. And again, probably one of the things I'll talk about there is it's often about 45% of the sexual offending is within the domestic abuse environment. Everything else is then around, often people are known to each other, even if it's only just from a night out, for example, and the kind of stranger episodes of sexual offending, which really cause alarm in the community, are very, very small. I think it's about 1%. And on all those times we've arrested people around that, might not have gone to prosecution, but we've managed to arrest them and bring them into custody. Into the next slide, if I could, please. So just talking very briefly around Wokinham's burglary. This is about residential burglary that you're looking at here. And you look for the trend over the period of time, there's a downward trend. You get the odd spike here, but generally we're doing a lot of work around tackling those who unfortunately suffer burglary. We've just had some, in Wokingham, because of the good transport links, we often suffer from organised crime groups coming and visiting, if you can use that phrase, doing burglaries and then moving somewhere else. So we work closely with our colleagues in Hampshire and Surrey, and in the Met as well, because they're coming from the Met of the M4. Recently just charged someone across Surrey Hampstead TV for 20 offences linked to family gold burglaries. So again, the challenging kind of investigations, but we do get that success. Just going to talk now, and I won't do all of these, just bearing in mind the time, just some key highlights around how we work together. With the community, with the CSP, with other organisations. This one here is around drug dealing and vulnerability on the Norreys estate. There's been a lot of work happening there in partnership with the CSP, partnership with other organisations to go out on joint patrols with the ASB team that works here in Wokingham. And some of that has then led to us to get closure orders, which actually helps people who've probably heard of the phrase cuckooing, where CDL groups go in and take over the home and then abuse the vulnerabilities of those individuals to do their drug dealing. So we've done a lot of work around the closure orders, a lot of work around with the housing association and tenancies, etc. Maybe evicting some people that actually cause an absolute havoc. And that's that joint approach that had a real impact. And it was good the other day. I sit on a number of forums across Wokingham. One of them, somebody who lived on the Norreys all their life, said, what a great place Norreys is starting to become because of all the work that's happening. That's not me bigging up the police there. That's about that partnership approach and how that is the most effective way to tackle a number of these matters. Because we've talked retail crime, we'll just touch on that. He stole a bit of my thunder here, boss, in terms of the offences that we arrested a prolific shoplifter yesterday, day before. They've I think that's 35 offences in total they've been charged with. So again, one of the ways we're tackling this is identifying those prolific offenders, bring them into custody, because they're the ones that are causing most of the harm. But the additional part is that about visibility. So I'm using my student officers and my tutors, again, to stop them. People talk about that visibility, people in cars, getting them out on foot, walking around those town centres, Woodley and Wokingham. It's not as good as I want it at the minute, but we're starting to have that impact about visibility and giving some confidence back to the actual community. There's the business and the people who use it. Disc will play an important part in that. There's a lot of work we need to do about making that work, and I had a brief conversation earlier on about that. But that is the best way of sharing that information, and something that with the PCC is going to roll out and help us. I'm just conscious of the time, and some of these things you can probably read, and the detail is in there. Probably the only other one I'll just touch on is around two things around car meets. I know that's been an issue here in Wokingham. We've done a lot of work, joint operation with our roads policing colleagues. There are difficult things because we don't always know when they're going to appear, but when we do, we can put operations in place. And you might have seen on the news in the last few months or during the summer where we ran an operation where we gave out, we spoke to a lot of people at Meeroke where it's been happening. We sent a 12 fixed penalty notice for breaching the public safety protection order. We did a number of Section 59 notices, which is about antisocial behaviour with a car, and some 450 incidents of excess speed, where I think about 300 tickets were given out. So we collectively can make an impact. It's challenging, and when we have the information and intelligence about the way it's going to happen, we get down there. That one was featured on the news. If you click on that link, you can see some of that information there. The last thing I'll talk about, just purely because of time, I had the pleasure of opening up what was the Positive Choices event on Tuesday. I think it was Tuesday and Thursday now, which is about, again, a partnership approach with emergency services, with other kind of organisations. Story was one of the organisations where you got reformed gang members go in and talk to the different age groups within the schools around making those positive choices. It talks about knife crime, talks about sexting, talks about keeping yourself safe, and around first aid. A really, really positive bit of work. The second year we've done that. And that's a really, really positive impact on the young people. And certainly that's the feedback. And you might have seen it on the news tonight. I think it was on ITV Meridian, so I didn't see it because I'm on my way here. But please have a look on your iPlayer, whatever it might be on. I'll stop at that point because some of the stuff you probably had to read, and I think we've got an opportunity for probably questions now all the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew, Jason and Andrew. I want to turn this around to questions. Councillor Conway first.
I haven't got a question, but before we do move to questions, Deputy Mayor, I just want to, on behalf of the council, thank all three of you, Matthew, Jason and Andy, for coming this evening and giving us your presentation. I particularly welcome Matthew's comments on the importance of prevention work and early intervention. I think that's absolutely vital, and I was so pleased to hear that. I was also delighted with Jason's commitments on mental health and domestic abuse and shoplifting. And I have to say, his stress on positivity. I couldn't agree more with you on that. And Andy's local update and that emphasis on partnership. I think we all welcome that too. And I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say we want to give you our warmest and most sincere thanks for all the work you're doing to keep us safe. Thank you.
Question from Pauline Jorgensen, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was a very interesting presentation, and I hope in due course we'll get the pack so we can have a good read. I very much appreciate your time, and also very much appreciate all the things you do for us. My question's on the other end of the scale. It's about shoplifting. You've mentioned quite a lot of it, but I just wondered if you wanted to add anything. I've been talking to a lot of shopkeepers in Woodley, and also the police in Woodley for that matter. I understand that there's going to be more resources in Woodley precinct potentially that can respond to issues, and I just want to ask you what's going to happen there, and also are there any other actions the council or local communities can take to help you in terms of dealing with the issue?
Thank you. So I'll try and repeat some of the areas that we've touched on already. I think one of the things that the force are doing, I think really well actually to try and address this concern that's been raised. Is not just about those frontline resources, important though they are, but through what's known as the assessment and investigation unit. Those are the officers who will deal with a lot of the volume crime that's coming in. The creation of what is effectively a business crime team or some dedicated PCs, civilian staff supporting that, who will make a real difference, I think, to identifying prolific offenders. It's one of those things that Andy's already talked about this evening. Identifying those prolific offenders is huge. I've had lots of conversations with the industry about this, and there is arguably, depending on how you count it, 65% of offences down to prolific offenders, and organised crime falls within that. So actually identifying those, there's some practical things that I think the force can just do a bit better and are determined to do. In fairness, it's not a criticism of the force, it's just recognising where there are improvements. So stores will, for example, receive a shoplifting pack where they're asked to provide their CCTV and their evidence. In the past, they've probably been designed a little bit with the police in mind as to what they need. Of course, the police need the evidence in the form they need the evidence because that's the criminal justice system. But actually working with a group of businesses as a bit of a focus group. So how can we make that easier for people to submit? There's just some business process stuff which the force are already seeking to address to make that easier. But I think the thing that everybody can do is recognise this is about partnership. It's not just about the police doing more. the police do need to do more, and I think will. It's about businesses, encouraging businesses to report more effectively and to take on board some of the crime prevention advice that is being provided to be more engaging. I've heard of cases of, I was talking to someone yesterday, off-duty police officer who actually intervened, stopped a shoplifter, detained someone, said to the manager, well, can you call this in? Oh no, we won't bother. We've got our goods back now. Even when you've got a police officer there laying hands on someone, they weren't interested in reporting it. So there is definitely more that we can do, and through obviously through the Borough Council, through the business development team, working with the bids, I think there is definitely more we can do to build that strong eco structure.
Can I just come back on that as well? I mean, Matthew's absolutely right. It's about partnership working. It's not all down to the police. And what we're finding is some of the, particularly the national, the national companies, big shops, they're not responding to us. They report the crime, but don't send the details of what was stolen. They don't send the CCTV. And then what we've been doing is filing the crime very, very quickly, rather than chasing them down for the CCTV because of resource challenges. Now, it may be the reason why they're not providing the CCTV because of lack of confidence that anything will be done. But we're working closely with the individual stores to get a joint protocol about how we're going to work together. And we've got analysts in place now to link these offences together and link the offenders. I'm hoping by the end of the month, all shoplifting CCTV will run. We're going to be start using facial recognition retrospectively to put them through the police national database, which will undoubtedly lead to more offenders being identified much quicker. We can arrest them, but there is a part to play, I think, in making sure that the stores do their bit. I was talking to a manager of one store recently who she was frustrated. Her security, a budget for security guard had been taken away, and rather than having 8 hours of CCTV coverage a day, it was 2 hours by a central office. We can't step in to cover gaps in the private sector, but we have to work closely in partnership working. And I'm absolutely committed to our organisation to stand up to the challenge which Matthew has set us, do a significant improvement in terms of number of arrests and numbers of positive outcomes of people brought to justice.
Councillor Clive Jones next, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor, and thank you very much for you three coming here. My question is actually about shoplifting, but I'm going to change it slightly. It is a serious concern to lots of retailers within the borough, and just this week I witnessed somebody walking out of a Morrison store with armfuls of food that they hadn't paid for. The person was a regular visitor to the store and is very well known to the staff, but they didn't do anything about it. They didn't want to. A number of shop managers are now telling me that it's not just individuals that are involved in shoplifting, but it is becoming more and more organised crime. So my question really is for you, Jason. Do you think that you have the resources to tackle shoplifting, not just from individuals, but from organised crime?
It's a good question. I don't have enough resources to do everything I would like to do to keep.
Apologies, we've got a few.
average is about 250 officers per 100,000. I've always argued that we aren't fair. And we have a new Home Secretary. I dusted off my welcome to the Home Office letter, changed the date and name. I've used that quite a lot recently, and reiterated the point that actually the funding formula is probably the one biggest thing that I would like the Home Office to sort for us. In fairness, from the conversations I've had with ministers, I think the issue isn't any longer with the Home Office; it's with the Treasury. It's not necessarily about having more money into policing, much as I might like that. It's about how the pie is sliced up. So if we had that average, we could arguably get to 250 officers per head of population. Would that be the target? Of course, the Chief Counsel said he'd like more resource. We'd love to get to 500, wouldn't we? But we've got to be realistic about where we're funded for. In terms of the impact of that, I think we are still seeing a lot of those officers going through training, but probably a useful metric to some extent is about charges, which you mentioned. Charges have increased by 3.76%, if my maths is right, from last year to this year in terms of absolute numbers of charges. Charge rates are interesting and important, but actually you've got to look at things like what the outcomes are for the public. So if you take charges for burglary, for example, there's been a headline figure recently. Yes, charges are lower than I would like them to be for burglaries, but actually burglaries are down across Thames Valley by about 37% versus where they are pre-pandemic. I'd rather just less people got burgled in the first place rather than the police were getting better at locking people up. So actually that preventative bit that I talked about earlier is really important. But I think we are starting to see some real benefits of those increased numbers.
Councillor Morag-Mulvern.
Oh, thank you. My question is for the Chief Constable. Excuse me, I'll just read it out from my phone. Let me get there. A local business in Embrook has had 2 thefts of maintenance equipment, and despite clear details of the vehicle used in the first theft being available, the police did not attend. Residents in the development off Matthews Green Road, elsewhere in the same ward, are reporting that night after night, the same small group of men are visiting the estate and systematically trying the doors of cars parked in driveways. I understand that many residents have provided the police with security camera footage of these men's activities, along with information on the hours that they operate. This has been going on for more than 2 months and has greatly increased in the last 3 weeks. And in fact, cars have been taken this week from adjacent roads. As you'll appreciate, residents are very worried. So my question is, what is the best way of making Thames Valley Police fully aware of what's happening? And what reassurance can you offer our residents and businesses on the action to be taken by the police? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. I'm going to hand it over to Andy, who may know about this, or he might not. But an absolute commitment is, if Andy doesn't know about this, he will get a member of his neighbourhood policing team to make contact. If you can pass some details, we will make immediate contact with them if there's a crime series there. But Andy, can you help with this?
Yeah, certainly. Yes is the answer. I do know. I don't know the exact detail. Every single morning we review a series of crime types. One of those is theft of and theft from motor vehicle. My priority crime team look at those and then they'll go out, do visits, etc. I can't comment exactly because I don't know exact details you're talking about in that particular matter, but I know in the last week we have had a bit of a spike with our vehicle crime. Sometimes it's organised crime groups coming to try and steal specific cars. Sometimes it's local people or people coming from neighbouring kind of areas trying to break into cars and steal whatever they can. I'd be grateful if you could pass the exact details and I'll find exactly what it is. And again, that detail and the fact people are reporting it is really important to us because that tells us our information about where we want to put people. So again, there's a tasking, what we call a tasking. So I direct my neighbourhood officers and my response officers to go into those areas at certain times where that information has been, whatever time period it is, for them to do specific patrols. So I would hope that issue will go away in the sense of not continue happening. But yeah, hopefully that reassures you our kind of process of how we look at it and try and investigate it. But the detail will be really useful to look into, and I'll report back to you from that point.
Councillor Rachel Bishopworth.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that all of us as councillors are deeply disturbed by the signs that conflict in the Middle East is spilling into community relations here in the UK. I know that many of us felt personally affected by the scenes that we saw over the weekend in London, which led to over 100 arrests. I've had residents raise with me that they are now concerned for the personal safety of themselves, their family, or their friends. What steps are the police taking to ensure that all residents are kept safe, whatever their beliefs, ethnic origins, or birthplace, and that wherever possible, positive action is taken to build understanding and respect between communities? And secondly, what support can we as councillors provide? What steps are the police
Thank you.
taking
I'll
to
start
ensure
with
that all
that. The Chief
residents
may
are
want
kept
to
safe,
add
whatever
more
their
to this.
beliefs,
I think
ethnic
you're absolutely right.
origins, or
I mean,
birthplace,
what we've
and
seen
that wherever
happening
possible,
internationally
positive
is
action
concerning
taken
for
to
us all
build
anyway, and I'm
understanding
not
and
sure,
respect between
whilst it's
communities.
always
And
a
secondly,
very
what
emotive
support
issue,
can we
I'm
as
not sure
councillors
many of us
provide?
necessarily predicted it would spill out onto our
What
streets in
steps
quite the
are
way
police
it
taking
has
to ensure
over
all
the last month or so.
whatever their
There's been an awful lot of work done from the first few days. I happened to be in the early days of October, I happened to be out in Windsor with some officers, and within 24 hours or so, this was part of officers' briefings for the start of their response shifts to be aware of the heightened risk, to pay particular attention to places of worship. It's all places of worship. And the force at a strategic level have made great efforts to reach out to synagogues, to mosques, so proactively making contact with them, allowing them that opportunity to make it easier to report any concerns they've got. We have sadly seen a few isolated incidents across Thames Valley. I don't think we can claim that there haven't been any issues, but I'm pleased to say nothing on a huge scale that you might have seen reported elsewhere. And I think that's one of the real challenges that we have. Thames Valley, all policing suffers sometimes from something will happen in the Met that gets a lot of media coverage, and therefore people feel it's happening on their doorstep because they're watching it on their televisions in Wokingham, they're watching it on their phones in Wokingham, and it feels like it's happening around them. That's one of the challenges that we have, and that's sometimes I might criticise the Met for that. I think in this case they've just been presented with some very difficult circumstances. So I think actually our response has been much better. The force have a really good track record of managing protest of all kinds, and we've had a number of events over recent weeks, all of which have been managed really well, and I would applaud the force for doing that. Particularly over the last weekend, there was a lot of concern given what was going on in London, and I have to say a really good operation put in place by Assistant Chief Constable Christian Bunt, has already been mentioned, who's responsible for local policing, really getting a grip of those issues. I think the best thing we can do is for level heads to prevail, to reassure people calmly. It is a very emotive issue, as I say, and all the messaging that the force and myself have been putting out about it is to make people aware of the increased police presence, the increased police effort to look at these issues, but without hopefully scaring people even more by making people feel that they have to have police officers there when they go to the synagogue or they go to the mosque because they're likely to be targeted. That's not what we're seeing on the ground. But the force has been, I think, really sensible and proportionate. So any issues relating to offences to do with those protests and other attacks on religious groups are being dealt with by CID rather than being dealt with by local response officers. So they've got that ability to have a really good level of investigation to look at appropriate charges if that's appropriate. And I've been very supportive of the work the Chief Constable's done to lead on that. I don't know if you want to add anything else, Jason.
Yeah, we have a command structure in place with daily reporting on hate crime. I hosted a visit on Monday with some members of our local Jewish communities with the head of the Community Safety Trust, which is a organisation provides security and protection to the Jewish communities. The national lead came and was praising Thames Valley in terms of the response to making our Jewish communities feel safe. But the same way, I've had so many letters of thanks for those attending protests from all different backgrounds, religions and belief. I was in Oxford this time last week, weren't we? I think it was Matthew, and the local council, and many of which made up for a number of members of the Muslim community, were incredibly positive in terms of how we've policed those protests. As Matthew said, we often have more protest activity than any other force other than London. We're a hotbed of protests about all sorts of things. So the staff are very, very experienced, and the number one role of the police when it comes to policing protest is we live in a democracy. We're there to facilitate peaceful protest. But at the same time, we will be robust if offences are committed. I'm pleased to report of the many protests we've had since the 7th of October. They've all been peaceful and we haven't had any difficulties or problems. We are seeing an increase in the number of people attending. So we've had some over 1,000 people attending some of the marches and demonstrations. But thankfully, they all passed off very peacefully, and hopefully that will continue.
Same thing. Sorry, can I just add one quick thing, just in a local context around it, the chief mentioned around anything that may have a hate crime element to it does get looked at every single morning in my morning meeting. And as the PCC's mentioned, anything that needs investigating goes straight into one of our DCs to look at.
Super, thank you very much.
Councillor Andrew Mickleborough.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. My question is to the Police and Crime Commissioner. The Wokingham Today newspaper, dated the 8th of December, included a lengthy article concerning the release, the previous day, of His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services Child Protection Services report. You are reported in that newspaper as saying that while this report recognises some of the good work being done, there were, quote, clearly some serious concerns. I'd expect the Chief Constable to be making those changes as quickly as possible. End of quote. Could you please summarise the concerns that were identified and what processes are in place within Thames Valley Police to support, monitor progress and evaluate the effectiveness of the measures that you are expecting to be implemented? Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to know I was quoted accurately for once in the paper. It doesn't always happen. I think the original quote was longer, but it is at least accurate. Yes, I think it is fair. I will reiterate what I said in there. If you read the full report, it does talk about some good work and some very good cultures, which I think are probably the most important thing actually in dealing with child protection. And I think we all know it is a challenging area. Local authorities have seen with Ofsted reports exactly the same thing about reports that require improvement locally, which will present challenges. So a very quick summary of the several recommendations. Most of it, not all of it, but most of it is around governance processes so that the work that is being done is properly captured and analysed, so there is proper oversight of it. One of the particular areas is around data sharing of child abuse images and sharing of other safeguarding information. Now, some of that has already been addressed because the inspectors came in May of this year, and over the summer, some of those backlogs that are referenced have been addressed, and the force has implemented through the multi-agency safeguarding hubs, the MASHs, some robotic automation, which actually reduces those queues and doesn't just remove the backlog, but hopefully keeps on top of that backlog for the future. So I think some of those actions are relatively easily ticked off as already done, which is encouraging. But I don't want to belittle some of the issues that need to be dealt with. In terms of that process, the Chief Constable and I have regular liaison meetings as well as our more public performance and accountability meetings where we look at these recommendations. But there is a gold group chaired by the Deputy Chief Constable, of which I have a member of staff who sits on, where they work through those recommendations line by line to make sure that the recommendations, not just in here, but all the other recommendations are dealt with. Some of those from HMRC have suggested time limits on them when they should be complied by. So we'll seek to do that, and I have to respond to HMRC as well as the Chief Constable does. Now, I would say I think in this case they raise some issues which I think, as they are largely going to be addressed. I would say in the outset that just because the HMRC have made a recommendation, it's not necessarily a requirement. Sometimes it's right to look at recommendations from inspectorates and say, we hear what you say, but actually we think not, because we're doing things in a different way. I don't think that applies here, but I'm always really careful. We shouldn't just parrot these things and say, yes, we accept everything, because otherwise we're not critically analysing the recommendations and understanding what's being asked. But that's the process.
Councillor Michael Firminger.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Actually, I did put a question here about police numbers, but it's been kind of answered. So I know that's been mentioned in the media and elsewhere. But I just really want to maybe add to that. Where do you want to be in in with regards to police numbers going forward, what your requirements. I mean, you kind of touched on it a bit, but I'd just like a little bit more, a bit more sort of detail on that would be really, really useful. Thank you.
Well, as I said, I'd love to be at 500 officers per 100,000 population. That'd be great. I'm sure the Chief Constable would be delighted. He'd need even more senior officers to manage them all. There'd be so many. But that's probably more than aspirational. What I've said that I would want to achieve is that we would not only meet that Home Office number, which we now have done, but as we go forward from that point, that we continue to grow our police officer numbers at least with the growth of our population. So going back to the point that Councillor Newton was making earlier about that per 100,000, is to make sure that we don't ever slip back. It's all very well saying yes, we've got a high number, but we know our population will continue to grow. So that's the minimum I want to get to. But of course, ultimately, the big win that I will continue to lobby for is actually changing that funding formula, which will allow us to have a more significant growth. Because at the moment, the only other headway I've got is taxing local taxpayers that bit more. And frankly, with the budget pressures we've got, which local authorities will recognise as well, our inflation costs are likely to be about 22 million this year, just in terms of inflation. That is a significant cost, clearly. There is only so much we can do in that incremental rise through council tax. What I really want is a revision of the funding formula, which will allow us to recruit more heavily.
Councillor Rebecca Margetts.
Thank you. Residents from the Gorserai community, which is in Finchampstead, the ward that I represent, they have various issues with antisocial behaviour. It's mainly small motorbikes, electric, the new thing that we're all seeing, electric scooters, and just generally people causing antisocial behaviour. They feel that they report it, but they hear nothing back, and obviously feel quite frustrated by that. What is the best way for them to report it, so that we're all following the correct procedures? And what do they do if we get no response? Thank you.
Thank you. The best way to report it is 101, ringing through there, or you can do the online web form and report it that way. The council have got an antisocial behaviour team as well. We work closely with those, so there's another way of reporting. I think their process, if I'm right, is it goes via email. They generally monitor those emails when they're working earlys and late shifts, essentially. So they're probably the two best ways of getting hold of us. If you don't get hold of us, then probably the best way is to kind of write into me if it's local, essentially, and saying this isn't working properly. But I would hope through those various ways, and also that link of the neighbourhood officers as well. I think what we'll see, especially when our neighbourhood numbers start increasing, and there's other things happening around that, then officers will be out on the street and they'll better directly contact them and speak to them. In terms of the whole e-scooter bit of work, we're going to start doing quite a lot of work around that as a force, and in terms of how we deal with those. And pretty much what we're looking at is how we manage that, because quite often young people underage that should be using them, and there's some issues around the parents and not understanding the laws, etc. So we're going to use kind of the 3 E's approach around it: engage, explain, and then ultimately enforcement. So probably watch the December period and into the new year. Might be upsetting some people's Christmases if they get certain presents that they might not have after a while, because there are some traffic offences there. So working with our road policing colleagues in terms of tackling that across the force, essentially, that is one of the bits of work we can do. But certainly, I think reporting into the council's ASB team and then 101 to our neighbourhood teams, who essentially will deal with that, because there's some civil orders and stuff we can do around those particular issues. But again, if you want to just share me some of that detail, I'll take that directly back to my neighbourhood team and see what we can do, and then report directly back into you. That's okay.
Councillor Jackie Rance, please.
I just wanted to say it was very comforting to hear that the knife crime, an offender is brought straight in the next day and it's dealt with. I was a Berkshire magistrate for 15 years, and it would have to wait till they are bailed and they come back. It took a long time, and the sentence was always, we were told, our guidelines, knife, prison. So it's very comforting to get them off the street. Thank you for your talk.
Councillor Sam Akhtar.
Thank you. really appreciate all the great work you three doing, keeping us safe. I really appreciate the presentations today. One of the things I was really keen to look at was it's really great to see that the number of burglaries and dwelling break-ins are down. But one of the things I'm noticing in the ward that I represent in Charleville and also the surrounding areas of Sonning and Walgrave is that more and more thefts from homes are now not involving break-ins anymore. But what is it? This is to do with keyless car thefts, which are on the rise. It'd be really great to learn about what you guys are doing to sort of promote the use of Faraday pouches to residents in the borough, and also around what work's going to tackle organised crime for who are all committing these offences of keyless car thefts in the borough.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head in the sense of who does this. It's organised crime groups. They specifically go and target and create their opportunities through watching people, etc. So again, it goes back a little bit to what I talked about around the burglary side of stuff. It's about how we share information intelligence across Thames Valley and across our neighbouring forces. And in fact, these are our national groups that move around. We've done some work with the car manufacturers, just trying to get them to sell a car with a Faraday pouch. I know it doesn't necessarily go down well with them because they're saying your car might get stolen. But again, if they're all doing it, then they're on a kind of level playing field. We also do things around Thames Valley Alert, just trying to raise awareness so that if there is issues going on in a local community, we're kind of getting that message out. And as I mentioned earlier, around our tasking process, and picking up what the councillor said earlier about that information coming in about people trying car handlers acting suspiciously, that gives us our kind of intelligence picture about where we put our resource in. So certainly I know when we have kind of the car thefts that are described, we look at putting our taskers in place and having either plainclothes officers or marked vehicles in and around that area at any one time. And our roads policing colleagues, so we've got what we call our roamers, so the people that don't work to necessarily to a police area, but our roads policing officers, our dog handlers, our armed response vehicles can assist with those patrols. So that's how we kind of tackle it in terms of locally and around. And we've had some successes around those organised criminals being locked up essentially for quite some time.
We are at the end of this session now. Would somebody be willing to propose that we extend the session for 10 or 15 minutes or something?
I fear very much, Mr. Mayor, that we won't get to the motion again if we extend for more than about another 5 minutes.
Okay, so, yeah, okay.
Can I propose we extend it for 5?
Yeah. Can we have a vote on that? Who's the seconder?
I'll second it.
Andy, thank you. Next question is from Councillor David Cornish.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, thank you. I'd like, if I may, to read a note to the Chief Constable. It's an email I received just last week from a resident of 9 Mile Ride in Finch Hampstead. He reports that he and 4 of his near neighbours had garden sheds broken into and a range of goods and tools stolen, on average of about £1,000 value per house. He says his next door neighbour and I both reported the crime to Thames Valley Police. The other 3 said there'd be absolutely no point in doing so. Unfortunately, they were proved to be correct. About 6 hours after reporting the crime, using the TVP online system, we received an email which in essence said, "You haven't given us a photo or CCTV or a name of the criminals, so the case is closed." No attempt was made to discuss the crime with us or to make a visit. Now, I can understand the operational challenges you have in responding to every crime in person. But given your reporting earlier and the comment about figures for burglary showing a downward trend, and this instance 3 victims out of 5 chose not to report the crime at all, that may offer some explanation perhaps of why that trend is there. What can we actually do, and I say us, you and us as members, to reassure our residents that household burglary isn't in effect being decriminalised?
Well, I think you probably talk about sheds rather than house burglaries, which we do. And to be fair, we do have a different response to theft of tools from a shed versus criminals who try to get into a house. One of the challenges our organisation's faced over the last probably couple of years now is we've had some new entry routes into policing where our officers either need to have a degree or have to get a degree when they join us, and for protracted periods we've had to release them to effectively spend time studying. The impact of that is between 30 and 90% of the time of our neighbourhood teams is being backfilling our response teams. So we haven't had hardly any neighbourhood officers on our streets across the Thames Valley over the last 2 years. Now, on the positive side, we've just yesterday made some announcements about changing our entry route effectively and doing away with a lot of what we call protected learning time when officers, our neighbourhood officers, need to backfill. Just by January, we've seen a 90% reduction in the number of shifts our neighbourhood officers have had to cover our response cars, really. So our neighbourhood officers from January, in effect, are going to be in our communities, and then we're going to be doubling the numbers. So that in itself will make a difference. Now, what I would encourage in this particular circumstance is it's really important that people report to us in terms of crime series, even though we won't necessarily investigate every single crime. What we do is look for the links. I live in a rural area where there were a number of attacks on garages, sheds, and what we have done is formed a WhatsApp group with our local neighbours. We've got a single point of contact in our neighbourhood team with a PCSO. And we report any suspicious people, any suspicious vehicles, goes directly to the PCSO, who checks them on our behalf. And it was interesting, when we first started that group up, it was running red hot in terms of people concerned. And the fear of crime has really gone down because we feel we have that response and that connection with our local communities. And the other thing is taking pictures of anything in those sheds, in those garages. It's so often when stolen property, we recover stolen property all the time. Matthew and I give away £200,000 worth of funding to charities a couple of weeks ago of stolen goods you receive. But so often when we do something like tools, we'll seize a garage load, and it's difficulty to get them back to their owners because their owners don't have any numbers of the items, no photographs. So anything we can do around prevention, around writing those down, be really useful. In terms of Andy's neighbourhood team, they'll be very happy to come and see you. We have free shed alarms and crime prevention advice.
Can I cut you short there? We're getting a bit too long in the answer. Thank you very much. A final question from Caroline Smith.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any of you three can probably answer this, and it has already been touched on. Many residents have well-founded concerns about the very dangerous way in which electric scooters and some of the more powerful electric bikes are sometimes being ridden. Can you please clarify what advice is currently being given to police officers in situations where the use of these items is being done in demonstratorily dangerous and sometimes illegal manner, specifically where circumstances would allow for confiscation of the scooter or bikes? Are officers being encouraged to do so or adopt a different approach? Thank you.
I'll take that question. Thank you, Councillor. I get more letters about e-scooters than anything else. It is a challenge. There is a gap in the law here. And just coincidentally, Andy and his other local police area commanders were called together for a meeting, and we've set expectations. In December, we're going to have a publicity campaign, particularly again targeting parents, encouraging them not to buy e-scooters for Christmas. And then we are going to engage and explain. I'm sure there'll be people riding e-scooters who don't know they are illegal. Full stop. You can't drive them on the road on the pavement unless it's part of a council accredited scheme, and you would need a driving license, insurance, and a helmet, and you can't get insurance for an e-scooter, so they're illegal. Full stop. So we're going to be moving to enforcement very, very quickly. The approach we are going to be taking, as Andy alluded to, we are going to be prosecuting the parents for no insurance for use cause permit in January, and we will be seizing a lot of these scooters very, very shortly. This is something the public are really, really concerned about. The caveat I will make is this: you will have seen there's two high-profile cases, one in South Wales and one in Salford, where officers are being investigated, having tried to pursue those on a scooter. I'm not prepared to put my officers in a situation where they lose their livelihood and they're effectively prosecuted. So there is a gap in the legislation here. I know the government are looking at this, but we will absolutely be proactive in starting to prosecute offences and take these scooters off the streets.
Thank you very, very much. Excellent questions. Can we have a round of applause, please? Matthew, Jason, Andrew, thank you so much, and you're welcome to leave.
Stay.
The next item is changes to Health and Wellbeing Board Terms of Reference. I understand that Councillor Hare is proposing this report. Is that correct? Do you have a seconder? Thank you, Prue Bray. David, would you like to speak on the report?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The Health and Wellbeing Board Terms of Reference has been updated to ensure we are appropriate to our remits. We used to call this board the Wellbeing Board, as it was felt that health should not dominate a local authority agenda. But we've now reintroduced health, as it is vital that we work in unity with health in all that we do. It's also very important to remember the most important, I believe, part of health that affects indeed everyone, often without individuals realising the effect, is public health. This is under the local authority control. We've refined the people invited to the board so that we ensure we get a positive input from health, as well as emphasising the fact that this board works in partnership, not only with health, but with many other departments in the authority and outside.
Thank you, David. Does anybody wish to speak against this report? If that's the case, then we now move to a vote on this item. All those in favour of the recommendation as set out in the report on page 49, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. Those against? Those abstaining? That's carried. Thank you very much. Next item is member question time. This is restricted to 30 minutes. That's 21:13, so that'll be 21:43. The first question is from Gary Cowan. Is Gary Cowan here or online or? No. So that will be just.
Send him.
Yeah, we will send Gary a written answer on that one. The next question is from Pauline Elliott-Simons. Please, would you like to ask your question?
Bray. As you'll be aware, a number of children in Wokingham Without were unable to get into their local secondary school this September. Some were offered places as far away as Oakbank at the other end of the district, the borough, and Yateley. There is pressure on secondary school places in the south of the borough generally. What are you doing to ensure that there are enough places for all our children closer to their homes in the south of the borough and specifically in Wokingham Without?
Thank you for your question, Pauline. I understand there is a significant issue for many families living in the Wokingham Without ward, and there has been for some time. They rely on Edgebarrow School in Bracknell Forest for local secondary school places. However, the school is not currently able to offer places to all Wokingham Without children. Officers have discussed this with Bracknell Forest counterpart, the school and the DFE, Department for Education. The Corvus Trust who run the school are keen to help but need financial assistance. Bracknell Forest cannot assist as they do not have a shortage of places for their children. The Department for Education have advised us that we cannot use our school budget to fund places. I appreciate that this national rule is frustrating, but beyond our control. Other Wokingham schools could make changes to their admissions arrangements to help Wokingham Without residents. However, judging by 2023 outcomes, these changes would have little effect. By September, over 3/4 of the Wokingham Without children had been allocated Edgebarrow School. 12 children were allocated accessible by public transport out of borough schools in Bracknell and Hampshire, and 9 children, not all of whom live close to Edgebarrow School, have been allocated Wokingham Town and Winnersh schools. No alternative Wokingham school is within walking distance by a safe walking route, so while the number allocated specific schools might change with amended arrangements, there is no good reason to think the end result would be very different if the other schools change their arrangements. I also note that even with the planned and proposed new homes in the north of the Woking without area, there will be insufficient children to justify a new secondary school in the area. That said, the council has an active programme working with the local schools trusts to increase the number of Year 7 places across the borough. And in the south, Bowhunt, St Crispin's and Embrook schools are all expected to be able to offer additional places in future through partnership arrangements. The conversion of the Forest School to coeducational status will ensure that all places at that school can be used from next year.
Pauline, do you have a supplementary?
I do, thank you. Edgeborough is our designated school, yet it is full, as you say, Councillor Bray, as are St Crispin's, the Holt and Bowhunt, the only other ones an acceptable distance from people's homes. Are you aware that if the radius used next year is the same as that used this year, then 36 roads in my ward that are within the designated area will not be eligible, plus 1,750 new houses due to be built in the ward. These are Wokingham children, they are not Bracknell's responsibility. Please will you look again with all urgency at building a new secondary school in the south of the borough?
I think you heard me say that even with the planned and proposed new homes, there will be insufficient children in the south of the borough to justify a secondary school in the area. We are, however, working on a secondary school strategy. We are expanding the schools that are currently the closest, but we can't work miracles and wave a magic wand and invent a secondary school. And the difficulty, in addition, is that even if Edgeborough were to expand, there is no guarantee that those places would go to children from our borough if more children from Bracknell applied and they happen to live closer. So it's a very difficult one to solve. It hasn't been solved in all the years we've been here now and up to now, and we will do our best for the people who live in Wokingham without, but I cannot promise you that every single child will get into Edgeborough School. It's just not possible.
Councillor Alison Swaddle.
Thank you. My question is for the Executive Member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways. The Council announced last week that a central government grant was being used to fund the restoration of the Saturday bus service from Winnersh Park and Ride to Reading until March. The lead member rightly encouraged residents to use this service if they want to keep it, in an effort to encourage their use and make it commercially viable. What will happen if use doesn't hit the required level and the bus service ceases when the grant runs out?
Thank you, Alison, for your question. Before the COVID pandemic, Winnersh Triangle Park and Ride was operated with a commercial bus service provided by Reading Buses. The success of the Park and Ride provision attracted grant funding from the Thames Valley Enterprise, the LEP. This allowed for the site's expansion. During the pandemic, Park and Ride services nationally saw a significant reduction in passenger levels, and similar was true for the Winnersh Triangle Park and Ride service, which at that time was relocated to Thames Valley Park due to the ongoing construction works at Winnersh Triangle. The service eventually had to be stepped down and then withdrawn due to low use. It was the borough's intention for a new service to begin following the completion of the construction at Winnersh Triangle. However, because that service was commercial, i.e. with no subsidy provided by the council, the decision to restart the service was with Reading Buses. Reading Buses determined that there would not be sufficient demand for the service given the change in travel habits and lack of use of park and rides nationally. The strategy is to use grant funding to kickstart the service at a time when passenger numbers are historically at their highest, whilst limiting the cost of resource to give the service the best chance. However, if the required level of use is not achieved by the time the grant funding runs out, the bus service will stop and the current situation will resume. Using the line for and X4 still remains an option. The car park would continue to operate, serving the adjacent railway station with electric vehicle charge points, but alternative uses would need to be considered at that time. Thank you.
Alison, do you have a supplementary?
I do. Thank you for your answer, Paul. I want to ask about what we're doing to promote the service, bearing in mind, you know, we're also offering free travel on buses on Saturday. And also, I do think that Reading Borough Council needs to be doing more to help. Their own transport, their new transport strategy talks about adding a lot more bus services to Winnersh. Will Wokingham Borough Council be pressing Reading Borough Council and pressing Reading buses to help subsidise and promote this route, as it certainly benefits Reading financially, as it's literally driving passengers to shop there?
Suddenly realised I'd left my one on. Sorry about that. Yes, promotion is going to be through our website. It's going to be through the media. Promotion by Reading Buses is already taking place. They've got that on their website as well. We'll be promoting it through social media and those particular areas. Reading Borough Council are aware of this, and I'll be pushing them to promote it as well, because quite rightly, as you say, they'll actually be benefiting through their economy.
Councillor David Cornish, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. My question is for the Executive Member for Planning and the Local Plan. The last version of the Local Plan update, the revised growth strategy, was published for consultation in November 2021. The plan listed sites suitable for development and gave a capacity for each site. For example, location, whichever it might be, has been identified for 10 dwellings. That is a clear and unambiguous statement. And yet, when discussing planning applications for some of these sites with officers, I was advised that these site capacity numbers should be seen as indicative or even the minimum number. I can find no statement in the revised growth strategy to support this. I understand that the LPU is a working document, with numbers therein used as part of a broader calculation by officers. But that is not what the public understand. If a site is included in a consultation with the site capacity indicated against it, then the public will base their responses accordingly. To tell them later that the number means something quite different is blatantly misleading. Could I ask the Executive Member for Planning to work with officers to ensure that when the next version of the LPU is published, the meaning of statements about site capacity is made much clearer?
Thank you, David. I agree that policy should provide as clear an indication as possible for how the Council proposes a site to be developed, and I will work with officers to this end. However, there are limits on what can be achieved. To explain, policy wording cannot be written as an absolute, with experience being that it must be drafted as an approximate number of homes or a figure in the order of a number of homes. Such wording is tried and tested and consistently supported by planning inspectors. Plans that do not use this formal wording will likely be modified by inspectors' examination in any event. We have also to recognise that the landowner has the right to submit a planning application for any form of development. This will be assessed against our policies as a whole. When an application is put forward for a greater number of homes than expected by policies, this will be considered. However, the primary consideration will be whether the proposal achieved quality design and placemaking. Proposals which do not achieve this will be refused.
David, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Chair, I do. Lindsay, thank you for your answer, which is very informative. But I think it speaks to perhaps a wider issue about how the council communicates about planning issues in general to the public. There is clearly an enormous gap between the precision and the professionalism required by the council when addressing planning issues and the understanding of the general public. But this gap in understanding works to the detriment of us all. And I think the next question from Councillor Barjett is along a similar sort of line. Could I therefore ask Lindsay that he facilitate a meeting when convenient with him, myself and the Director for Place and Growth discuss in broad terms how we might possibly work together to improve some of our communications on this.
Yes, David, I'd be quite happy to do that.
Councillor Charles Margetts, please.
Thank you. Question for Councillor Ferris. The council is planning to develop 2 SEND schools, a solar farm and a COVID wood alongside Barkham Ride. There are also currently planning applications with the council for close to 100 houses to be built on a site on the same stretch of road. Much of this work is scheduled to take place in 2024-25. Barkham Ride is a narrow secondary road. At the junction with Commonfield Lane, a car driver has to stop if a bus or lorry is coming the other way, as the road is not wide enough for 2 lines of traffic. The drainage system under the road, based on comments from Volker Highway staff to me, is poor, and based on figures from Wokingham Borough Council Highways, there have been over 60 sets of roadworks on this road since 2019. My question is, what work is planned to Barkham Ride to manage this anticipated additional traffic?
Thank you for your question. In the first instance, it's important to note that the COVID Memorial Wood will be provided as an extension to Park, which is not accessed from Barkham Ride. In addition, the solar farm, when operational, will generate few traffic movements. Turning to the other matters you raised, the planning applications for housing are currently under consideration, and therefore it is not appropriate for me to specifically comment on them. Notwithstanding, you will be aware that the impacts of a proposed development on the highway and traffic is an important consideration in the planning application process. Mitigation is requested where it is necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms. Whilst the planning application will consider matters in detail, I note the sites which the planning application for houses have been received were included as proposed allocations when the local plan update revised growth strategy consultation 2021 approved by the previous administration and having been assessed for their traffic impacts. The proposal for the SEND schools is not yet subject to a formal planning application. A transport assessment will be prepared and considered in association with any planning application submitted in due course. In addition to its role as a regulatory authority, the council is the construction client for the solar farm and the SEND schools, which heightens our ability to manage and coordinate construction activities to help minimise the impact of constructions as far as possible. Lastly, on the matter of roadworks, records show that 73% of the roadworks on Barkham Ride during the period you mentioned were associated with utilities.
Charles, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I certainly do. I mean, I think the concern of my residents is there's a significant amount of development planned here, and they're concerned basically that this is all going to turn the area into a complete gridlock. And I note there was no plan basically mentioned there to any upgrade of Barkham Ride to cope with that. My view that infrastructure should be upgraded to match development. There are 2 concerns here: the quality of this road, which has been referred to, and the capacity of it. Now, myself and Councillor Cornish met planning and highways officers earlier last week, and I share many of the comments Councillor Cornish has made earlier, basically in his question. And we requested basically that highways and planning officers come up with a plan to actually manage the development of this area so that there's a proper plan and residents can be reassured that the council is not going to leave them in gridlock and limbo while construction is going on initially, and secondly, after construction is finished. And I would ask basically that Councillor Ferris considers the request, which is not just from me, basically from members of his party too, who are just concerned for the sake of their local residents, and considers whether some kind of plan can be put in place and actually liaison take place with local members to make sure that the area is represented and looked after properly.
I'm quite happy to be involved on a cross-member activity. I got to remember that we're still in the middle of putting the local plan together, and as I said, I can't specifically talk about this issue, but need to remember that this particular site originally had 270 homes on Rook's Nest Farm, which would have had about 3 years of development. So there was work taken in place at that time, but I am more than willing to be involved with the local members in the area to come through as the particular planning actions and activities come into place, so that we can do. And as I touched on in my original answer, the last part of which was that as the authority that's involved with putting the solar farm together and the SEND schools, we would be raising to do the minimum so that we can make sure that it works in the way. So the answer to that would be yes, I'm more than happy to do that. But there are things in place that I can't talk about.
Councillor Jackie Ransby.
The council is claiming there is no reduction in footfall in our town centres. The experience of business people in the town centres is very different. How do you explain this?
Thank you very much for your question, Councillor Rance. The sensors in the town centre are showing an increase in pedestrians from 2020 to 2023. The data prior to 2020 is not available. We want to encourage people to use our town centres. That is why we are providing free bus travel on the 6 Saturdays leading up to Christmas using ring-fence grants for public transport. In addition, we have used funds from the Economic Development Fund to provide free town centre parking for the Winter Carnival in Wokingham on Sunday, November the 26th, and for the Woodley Winter Extravaganza on Sunday, the 3rd of December. I'm sure that you will welcome both of these two initiatives to encourage people to use our town centre. I understand the very real pressures on our retailers and indeed all businesses in the borough. The pressure has been massively increased by the cost of living crisis caused by your government. The crisis that has seen inflation at over 10% for quite some time, although it is now at 4.6%, it is still way above the Bank of England's target of 2%. We have also seen a more than doubling of energy costs in the last 2 years, adding £1,000 to household bills in Wokingham. On top of this, mortgage rates have increased since Liz Truss's budget in 2022. A household remortgaging in Wokingham is seeing extra interest costs of around £500 a month. Food costs have risen by 30% over the last 2 years. This all adds up to increases in costs for many households in Wokingham of well over £6,000 a year. That is £6,000 a year that can't be spent with local businesses and local retailers. Is that my time? Sorry.
Jackie, do you have a supplementary?
Thank you for that. The Liberal Democrats have considerably extended the charging hours in the mornings, evenings and weekends, so total ticket sales, including these times, will skew the data and not demonstrate a fair comparison with previous years. Alongside total number of ticket sales, will you commit to publishing data for times that can be directly compared with previous charging times?
Yes, we will do.
Thank you.
Councillor Abdul Lois, please.
Thank you. My question is to the Leader of the Council and Executive Member for Housing. How many instances of antisocial behaviour by council tenants have there been in last year, and how many evictions has this resulted in? Thank you.
I'm not sure where you're going with this question, Abdul, but I hope you will share my view that the role of responsible politicians at local as well as national levels is to bring people together, not drive them apart. There is an implication in your question, which I'm sure you didn't intend, that council tenants are very different kinds of people from other residents. Anyone who's worked with our tenants will be able to tell you that that is most definitely not the case. The overwhelming majority are good, law-abiding and decent members of our community. At a recent presentation on the Tenants' Charter, we heard representatives from the Tenant and Landlord Improvement Panel tell us about the need to end the stigmatisation of council tenants. I fear your question is not helping to advance that objective. But to answer you directly, there have been 978 incidents of antisocial behaviour of all types in relation to council tenants in the last year. That does not mean, of course, that 978 tenants have been involved. The figures include repeat offenders. 2 evictions have taken place due to antisocial behaviour. Eviction, of course, is the last resort and only used when all other methods have been exhausted. In low-level ASB cases, and that's the vast majority of the 978 just referenced, eviction would be a totally disproportionate response. Our aim is always to prevent low-level cases from becoming more serious ones that might ultimately require eviction. To that end, housing officers have recently been adopting an early intervention approach to nip problem behaviour in the bud. Should that behaviour continue, then an active case will be open to investigate a potential tenancy breach. If cases are judged to be sufficiently serious, community safety specialist ASB officers
Councillor Conway,
make
can
an
you wrap up,
assessment
please?
of evidence and undertake any required enforcement action. And over the last year, the community safety team took enforcement action short of eviction in 27 cases.
Abdul, have you got a supplementary?
Yes, I have. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. You have answered half of it, as you said, 978. Thank you for that. But however, would you agree with me? Antisocial behavior has serious consequences for local communities. How do you justify this lack of action?
I have to say that's a quite disgraceful imputation that our officers have not been taking action. And I hope you'll actually reconsider that question and think about withdrawing that slur on our officers. I think that was really below the belt, and you ought to be stopping to reflect, I think, on the implications of what you say. I'm afraid that has taken my breath away, and it's accusation of lack of action. I have just given you a detailed response of what officers are doing to tackle this problem. And your response is, how are you going to explain your lack of action? That is quite disgraceful, And I hope you will reflect on that and never ask such a kind of question again.
Camp. Yes, Prue.
I've got, I think it's 4218. I think you have the discretion to extend the period for, because we've only got a couple left.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful if we could extend the period so that everybody can get to ask their question.
Do we have a seconder for that? That's Imogen Shepherd-Debay. All those in favour of extending the question time? Against? Carried. Thank you. Next question is Phil Cunnington, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A number of public statements by the Lib Dem leader and others recently have said that excess spending in adult social care is jeopardising the council's financial stability. Can you explain which areas of adult social care have overspent the budget agreed by this council and by how much year to date?
Thank you for the question, Phil. The Local Government Association estimates that councils in England face a funding gap of almost £3 billion over the next 2 years, just to keep services standing still. The majority of this funding gap, as experienced in Wokingham, relates to pressures in social care for adults and children's services. Wokingham is a well-run, efficient council, providing valuable services to residents. We use our limited funding wisely, and adult services provide good care and support, making a positive difference to many people, enabling to live their lives in ways that matter to them. However, after more than a decade of chronic underfunding of core services for vulnerable adults and children, coupled recently with unfinanced inflation, we now face a financial precipice. In respect to the overall allocation of funding to adult social care, we require greater weighting to be given towards recognising the basic costs of delivering services when determining need, as opposed to steering funding elsewhere as a result of recognised specific factors such as deprivation. In 2023-24, Wokingham has once again received one of the lowest percentages of settlement funding assessment grant as a share of its total income of any unitary authority. The adult services budget in 2023-24 was 65.9 million, 36.5% of the total council budget. We're currently forecasting a net overspend of 406,000 for the 23-24 financial year. This represents a 0.7% overspend against budget. Inflation was a lot more than that. The overspend in adult services is being driven by demand for services, the availability of care alongside the increased placement
David, can you start to wrap up, please?
Across adult services and principally by inflation.
Phil, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I do. Thank you for that answer. Not as specific as I would have liked, but thank you all the same. I'm aware of two streams of funding that we have coming into the council from Better Care Fund and from Continuing Healthcare, which you will be very well aware of. I hope that you can tell me that we have been as a council receiving these monies so far this year, because obviously to not receive them would be very difficult, first of all. But secondly, it means that the council would be funding some additional services that the NHS have not yet paid for. And it's my concern that if we don't collect that money, then we will find ourselves further in debt. So can you please tell me if that has not been collected, what procedures you've put in place in order to pick up the debts that may be owed to us by the NHS?
Thank you very much for that question, Phil. And as you know, the NHS isn't the most generous of payers, and certainly we haven't found it easy. And I can't say the specific things, but certainly our officers are going after that. But it'd be good if you and I got together and we can put some more pressure on the NHS, because certainly I know, for instance, they haven't paid some of our money, which is amounting to almost £2 million. And we need to have that now, and that will certainly help us.
Councillor Laura Blumenthal, please.
Thank you. Reintroducing women's only swimming was signed off by this council a year and a half ago, but still hasn't started again. The current plans are a million miles away from the vision of it being a convenient and pleasant experience to get more women being active. Plans include it being held at the Forest School, only available between the times of 8 a.m. and 9 a.m, Tuesdays and Wednesdays during term time. Women will also have to hire the facility themselves to open it and close it and organise a volunteer lifeguard. What consultation has this council done with women to know that this is what they want, that this works for them, and that it will be a success?
Thank you, Laura. Since Places Leisure began operating the leisure centres in 2018, there have been no women-only sessions, swim sessions. Prior to the redevelopment of Bournemouth Leisure Centre, the Town Council operated the site for swimming, which included women-only sessions. However, when the site was rebuilt, the pool was relocated with windows adjacent to housing, and the pool is also overlooked by the cafe viewing area, and so is no longer appropriate for women-only sessions. S106 funding was secured as part of the Winnersh development, and an agreement was reached with Forest School to fund work there, including pool refurbishment. Work was scheduled to commence in late 22, but delays were experienced, meaning that the pool work was only completed in June this year. The agreement at the time with the school was restricted due to school safeguarding procedures. Swimming sessions were allocated 2 hours per week before the school day begins, as the pool is booked every evening for local swim schools and is also used in the day by Forest pupils and 9 local primary schools. In line with the school hiring and safeguarding procedures, usage must be as a group, and a lifeguard must be provided by those booking the session. Officers are currently progressing discussions with the school and are seeking local groups within the community to utilise the offered sessions in consultation with the Equalities and Diversity Forum.
Laura, do you have a supplementary?
I do, thank you. And thank you for your response, Ian. My question is, how are women supposed to feel that this is the best offer the administration can give them? How are women supposed to feel that they haven't been consulted, nor has the councillor who championed this for them, Councillor Shahid Yunus, or informed of the progress? How are women supposed to feel that this looks like it's being set up to fail and look like there was no demand from women at all because it's so inconvenient? 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. We know that women are going to work or getting children ready to go to school. This is a chance for the council to show that they prioritise women's health and needs, and this offer is not it. How are women supposed to feel that they're just being offered the scrapings of the barrel and an offer that they do not deserve?
I don't know, Laura. How did women feel when your administration relocated Bulmish Pool, where there were already established women-only sessions, to a position where they couldn't be any longer held? The windows directly adjacent to housing and with a viewing area from the cafe. How did women feel about that? Did you consult women about doing that?
Okay,
It's irrelevant, Ian.
okay, calm down, everybody. Now we move on to the next item, which is minutes of committee meetings and ward matters. Can those of you who wish to talk, ask a question, sorry, please put your hand up and Susan will take a list and I will go through that list. Just a couple of points. I just want to remind everybody that we're talking about published minutes here. We're not talking about draft minutes, which have not been published yet. And we're also talking about ward matters. The expectation from me is that you will be speaking about your own ward, not somebody else's ward. Is that clear to everybody? Thank you. Well, don't we start at the top? Yeah, I think we've got all the hands there. Hold on. Start. Andy Croy first, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Addington School, which is in my ward, is a special school for children with special educational needs. Historically, the borough has appointed a person to the Board of Governors, and I think the last person who held that role and held it for many years was Councillor Baker. I've got a vague memory of that vote coming to council at one point. I do note that Councillor Baker since September has no longer been on the Board of Governors. So I guess my concern is are we sure that Democratic Services and the education team, and this I guess is to prove, have not lost sight of the fact that we have had an appointee to the school and that we no longer have that person on the board? So would Prue look at that and make sure we're not missing out on an appointee that we have historically had? Thank you.
I don't know the exact details. I'm not sure whether we've been informed of anything, and we will look into it and see what transpires. I don't know anything about it, I'm afraid.
Sorry, Councillor Baker.
I'd like to make a point of personal explanation, since my name's been raised several times there. The role of a local government office appointed school governor disappeared many years ago. I was continuing that role in my own capacity, not as an appointed WBC governor, because there are no appointed WBC governors in schools. That is why Councillor Bray doesn't know anything about it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Baker. The next Sorry. Ian Pittock, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. This question concerns Barkham Ward and is for the leader, since it goes across planning, health, leisure, and children's services. When we set up the Arbfield SDL and what became Bowhunt School, instead of building a separate leisure centre for the public and a standard-sized school sports hall, we instead acquired the large MOD sports centre using S106 monies. This contained a huge main hall, a large climbing wall, 2 dance studios and 3 squash courts. The intention was that the school would use the facility during the day and the residents of Finch, Hampstead, Arbfield and Barkham at all other times. We also built into this a small gym for use by the public in the school day and until such time as the main facility was opened up properly. The public access to the main facilities is yet to be available many years later for out of school use. Can you tell us, please, what your intentions are now regarding the entire facility? And will you commit to publishing a plan by the end of January to show how the long delayed full access will be given to residents? Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Well, thank you for your question, Ian. First, I think I must say that it's greatly to your credit as a ward councillor who was only elected in May that you've been trying to resolve a very, very long-standing issue. I can tell you that our colleague Lindsay Ferris, the executive member for planning, will be visiting the site to investigate. As soon as he's done so, I think it would be wise if you met with Lindsay and myself so we can discuss next steps. My intention is that Lindsay will lead on this because it is fundamentally about the fulfilling of planning obligations. But I'm sure he'll want to involve you in the formulation of a plan of action.
Councillor Shahid Yunus, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This is a question with respect to my ward, to the executive member for active travel and transport and highways. In the last couple of days, I've been in my walk around speaking to a number of business community in the precinct area. And here are some of the facts they've shared with me. These are not the council, these are the business community. I've got the names of the business as well, but I don't want to say this in public domain, but I've got them if you need them either as well, just to prove. Number one, the sales figures have gone down since the car parking charges have gone up. This is what I'm talking about. Since the car parking charges have gone up, the sales figures have gone down by 12 to 15%. They have lost almost most of the customers who are spending £10 or 10 to £15. So they're only getting bigger spenders under 10, 15. Those customers are not coming down. In addition to that, they've lost, obviously, the police commissioner knows 5 to 7% they lose because of shoplifting as well. So as a result, combination of this, what's happened is they had to reduce number of staff because they no longer can afford to pay. So my question is, what would your advice and response would be to the business community who are facing the hardship because of the increased car parking charges, and what step the council is taking to mitigate those losses?
Thank you for your question. I think a lot of it's to do with the cost of living. Sales figures are down in quite a number of town centres and city centres. But what we are doing is putting on free bus travel for weekends on Saturdays. And we've also got the free car parking on the extravaganza, as well as free bus travel as well on those particular days, 3rd of December. As you know, we are currently doing a report looking at the impact of the increase in charging. And as I said already, back to the George Evans, the member of the public, there hasn't actually been any impact at all, and the numbers have not gone down. And footfall has actually not gone down at all in Wokingham, where it has actually been, we've got some sensors. So we are doing as much as we can to attract people into our town centres. We cannot do any more. We have a budget that we have to meet. Previously, we had a shortfall of £600,000 to £800,000 last year, hence why the charges had to go up. That was the only way of fulfilling our shortfall in the budget. They had not gone up for over 5 years. If they'd gone up in small steps, we wouldn't have had that same impact. So I think a lot of it is down to the cost of living.
Councillor Rachel Burgess, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. My question is for the Exec Member for Environment, Sport and Leisure. Many residents in my ward of Norreys who are older or less able walk to St Crispin's Leisure Centre to take part in various fitness-related activities such as standing exercise to music or Pilates. They're unable to walk to Montague Park, for example, and they're unable to walk as far as Carnival Hub, and many don't drive. In the recent consultation on the future of the leisure centre, a total of 156 respondents stated they would stop exercising completely if there were no facilities at St Crispin's, and over half of these stated location as the cause. However, in the recent Corporate and Community Overview and Scrutiny report and the meeting regarding this, there were no guarantees that appropriate facilities or financing would be available for these activities should the centre be transferred to St Crispin's School. The voice of these residents was clear in the consultation, but it seems as though the needs of these residents and the detrimental impact on their physical health and well-being has been ignored. My question is, what does the executive member suggest that I say to the many older or less able residents in my ward who value this important community asset and who fear that it is being taken away from them through the actions of Wokingham Borough Council?
Thank you, Rachel. I do agree that there is a significant percentage of the respondents to the consultation that say I've read the verbatims, and that's what struck me. It came through very strongly. We are, as you know, we have been to overview and scrutiny with a report. It is being reconsidered at overview and scrutiny after further work. There will be more information added for that. All I can say for the time being is, you'll have to wait until it's been through overview and scrutiny and then to the executive.
Councillor Jane Ainsley, please.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. Can the leader of the council update us, excuse me, on any responses from the management company for Montague Park with respect to the issues that residents have been facing with the company?
Thank you, Jane. The management company you're referring to is Firstport. I wrote to them some while ago. I have now finally received a response, and that response is actually broadly positive. It does show some commitment to trying to address the concerns raised by the leaseholders, and I'm very happy to share that response with you if that's helpful.
Councillor Peter Harper, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This question is for the Executive Member for the Environment. I've been approached by a Neighbourhood Watch Coordinator covering sheltered housing in Finch Hampstead about the changes to the hedge cutting schedule, which has gone from twice a year, April and October, to once a year in December. This reduced cutting schedule creates an untidy and unkempt environment which attracts antisocial behaviour and criminal activity. Will you reconsider this reduction in cuts where it causes an impact on neighbourhood safety?
There has been no reduction in hedge cutting in the last couple of years. What happened before that, I don't know. If you could send me an email to me with the details of the specific location, I will get the team to have a look at it.
Councillor Stephen Newton, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This question is to the Executive Member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways. Some residents within Maiden Early have applied to the council for a licence to look after a green area within the ward, which turns out to be part of the adopted public highway, which creates some complications. Their intention was to try and beautify the area, reduce the burden on the council, and to provide a focus for community cohesion. I wonder if the executive member could please commit officers to work constructively with the residents to support such initiatives, taking into account reasonable requirements for safety and working practices, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, for your question. Section 142 of the Highways Act actually covers cultivation of highways by third parties. What I will do is work with yourself and get officers to work with us to overcome any particular issues. There are conditions, there always are, and certainly there'll be a £5 billion public liability insurance would be required. But I'll commit to working with you to try and get this on the ground.
Councillor Phil Cunnington, please.
Thank you. My question is to the Executive Member for the Environment, and is to do with St Crispin's Leisure Centre. One of my residents is involved in arranging fairs which are held at that leisure centre, and he advises me that he's been told he cannot make bookings for those fairs to continue after December. Now, in my question to you at Executive, I asked about continued community use, and you assured me that that would continue. So does this mean that actually that's not going to happen and community use won't continue? And with regards to your comment that the decision had not been pre-made and so you couldn't prejudge it, does that actually mean the decision has been made? You just can't say.
Phil, I don't know if you actually went through the whole report that went to overview and scrutiny. If you did, you will have seen that there is an intention in there on our part to do everything we can to maintain access, public access, not only for the fairs, but in other ways too. Until that has been seen again, the revised report has been seen by overview and scrutiny and gone to Executive, I can't make any commitment at this point.
Councillor Catherine Glover, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. My question is for the Executive Member for Active Travel, Transport and Highways. In Shinfield South, many residents really appreciate the improved bus service we've had since last year, when the Mere Oak Park and Ride 600 service was extended to Risley and Thames Valley Science Park. How long do you anticipate the funding will last for the supported bus services in Shinfield, like the 600 and the Leopard number 3 during the evening?
Thank you, Catherine, for your question. These are supported bus services. They're supported through a combination of council tax and Section 106 funding. Recently, we let a new contract which extends to the 31st of August 2026, and hopefully that will give surety to businesses and residents who live in the area. There is a more detailed report which went to the Executive in February this year, and if I refer that to you, if you've got any further questions after you've read that, please come back to me. Thank you.
Councillor Charles Margetts, please.
Thank you. Question for Councillor Shenton. I was contacted about 6 weeks ago by a couple of residents in my ward who'd noticed extensive tree cutting going on at a site on Barkham Ride. As this site had a history of cutting down TPO trees in the past, I contacted the officers and asked them to look into it. In fairness to them, they dealt with it very quickly and went to the site and checked out what was going on, and there was no TPO tree cutting. My then follow-up was to say, could they please inspect all the remaining trees and make sure any which of any value would be protected? The answers were vague and non-committal. Further pressing of officers basically then revealed about a couple of weeks later there had been a 2-3 month period where the council had no ability to serve TPOs due to a problem with mapping of software systems. I'm told that's now resolved. I found out recently, basically, that the same site has now got a pre-app for housing on it, Therefore, my question is, can you please check into the situation and check that TPOs can be issued? And if I write to you with details of the site, can you make sure it's prioritised for inspection ASAP due to the housing situation?
Yes, please do write to me, because I want to stop any tree being cut down if I can. But we have so many trees that are not protected that it would take us years, literally, with the resource we have. And at the moment, we can't increase that resource. But anything that any councillor thinks is in urgent need of protection because of speculators in the area, please let me know, and we'll prioritise those areas.
Councillor David Cornish.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. My question is for the Executive Member for Active Travel and Highways and concerns California Crossroads, which is most definitely in Finch Hampstead South. This is sometime overlooked. Could the Executive Member for Active Travel and Highways please provide an update on the latest situation concerning the plans to upgrade California Crossroads? Could he also offer reassurance that consultations prior to the start of work will demonstrate to local businesses how the necessary levels of access for their customers will be maintained during this period in fully practical terms?
Thank you, David, for your question. The trial holes have been completed. They are currently being analysed. Businesses will be contacted in the next couple of weeks by the team. They're all the ones surrounding California Crossroads. They'll go into discussions with business owners to look at their accessibility, how they get into the property, how they have deliveries, etc., to gather information to then put into the programme. The works actually will start, the physical works on the first phase in February 2024. Letters will also go out to all residents in the area as well. And a meeting is planned middle of December, which people will then be invited to actually understand what the latest information is and if they have any further questions. Then before the works start, businesses will be contacted again, and the contractor and the team will go round all of the businesses to make sure everybody understands what phases are going in first and the work that is being undertaken, and make sure everything is okay. The team will also be on hand when the works commence on site with the contractor if there is any particular issues that come up. Thank you.
Councillor Laura Blumenthal, please.
Thank you. Sorry, Paul, it's another question for you. The council did good work earlier this year, putting down yellow lines at a junction in my ward, which I requested. Is by Highwood Primary School, but unfortunately, parents are still parking there at drop-off and pick-up time on the yellow lines and also on the grass verges next to it. And residents are saying, what was the point of them going down if they're not going to be enforced? Civil parking enforcement officers say they visit the school once a month, which really is too low for this area. So I know that resources are tight, but please can you look into if we can increase the number of visits to this school, because I see CPE officers and car parks and in Wokingham Town Centre all of the time. I wave to them, but if we could get some more focus on this school, I'd be appreciative.
I'll certainly look to get the CPE officers down to that particular school to visit more frequently. Thank you.
The next item is statements by the leader and executive members. Can you please indicate who wishes to speak? So, if you would like to start, please.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Mayor. I should like to update Council on the strategic partnership we have agreed with the University of Reading. It's long been my ambition to secure for the Council the advantages of having a world-class university in the borough. And over the last few months, we've been able to engage very fruitfully with the university on ways in which we can work together on areas of common interest. We recently had the first meeting of a newly formed strategic partnership board comprising the Vice Chancellor and his head of community engagement on the university side, and the Chief Executive, and me in my capacity as leader representing the council. We heard reports of work underway in 4 separate areas: the climate emergency, arts and culture, economic development, and participatory research. Each of these work streams is led by a senior academic and a senior council officer. We stand to gain much from tapping into the expertise available at the university, but the university can be a winner too, as being able to demonstrate that its research is having an impact on public policy will help it to acquire grants for further research projects. I should also like to inform Council that Clive Jones, the Executive Member for Business and Economic Development, has asked to be released from his role so that he can devote more time to his campaign to become the next MP for Wokingham. I want to thank Clive for all his work on the Executive and wish him well in his parliamentary endeavours. I'm delighted that David Cornish has agreed to replace Clive on the Executive. David has been shadowing Clive for some months, and his business experience will be invaluable in this new role. David's joining the Executive means, of course, that he can no longer be involved in overview and scrutiny. I'm pleased to report that his place on the Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee will be taken by Catherine Glover, while Al Neil will replace David on the Climate Emergency Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Clive has kindly agreed to act as substitute on these committees and also as substitute on the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee. These changes will come into effect from the 1st of December. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Councillor Clive Jones.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. We have a really good team of officers working hard to energise the business and economic development function within the council. We are developing a new business and economic development strategy, which should be ready in the later part of 2024. In September, we held a jobs fair that was seen as a huge success by both exhibitors and the 250 or so people who attended the event. We hope to do a similar event in Woodley early in 2024. Much more is also going on to improve our local economy, which is much needed to offset the impact on consumers of this Conservative government's increases in personal taxes, doubling of energy bills, 30% increases in food costs, and an average increase in a mortgage in Wokingham of £6,000 a year. That is £6,000 a year that cannot be spent in the local economy. Mr. Deputy Mayor, may I step down from being leader of the council and the executive member for business and economic development so I could concentrate on my role as the Lib Dem parliamentary candidate for Wokingham. I retained the business and economic development portfolio. However, it is now time for me to relinquish this role so that it will give me more time to the task of leading the campaign to ensure that the first ever Liberal Democrat MP for Wokingham is elected. I'm delighted that my colleague David.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. This part.
Sorry, my name's not Madam. Sorry.
So, I'm sorry. That's what I'm talking about. Your weekends. I don't have the point of order to hand, but this part of the agenda is not to be used for political speeches. Yeah. It's not to be used for political speeches.
Can I get a view on that from Democratic Services, please? Yeah, sorry, Andy. Can you quote the procedure rule, please?
Thank you, David. It is 4.2.23 statements by the
leader and the executive members, and it says that these statements shall be primarily to advise the council, and it says that the statements that advise members of the council, speeches of a party political nature will not be allowed. I used to try and get. It was you lot who started it, so don't clap too hard.
Thank you for your intervention, Andy Croy.
Deputy Mayor, could I continue? And I shall take account of what Councillor Croy has.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Yep. Okay, I'm delighted that Councillor David Cornish is going to take over the portfolio. I have very much enjoyed working with him over the last 6 months, and I'm sure that he will be a very capable and effective executive member for business and economic development. Thank you.
Councillor Paul Fishwick, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. One-day travel card saved. I was unable to support the Mayor's proposal to withdraw the travel card and urge the Mayor to reconsider the true impacts of the scheme. I also agreed to sign a joint letter from the Campaign for Better Transport, one of 20 local authorities to do so, opposing the plans. And I was delighted to hear the news that Transport for London will retain the one-day travel card. Rail ticket office closures withdrawn. On the 31st of August, I approved a response from this council to strongly oppose the planned, poorly thought out closure of ticket offices across the country, including here in Wokingham Borough. It was welcome news that this ridiculous plan was withdrawn last month. Buses to start from Winners Triangle Park and Ride. 2 weeks ago, I approved grant funding to operate a bus service from Winners Triangle Park and Ride to Reading Town Centre on Saturdays, starting on Saturday 25th of November and continuing until at least mid-April 2024. Talking of parks and rides, we inherited a conservative financial white elephant known as Coppy Beach Park and Ride that had a poor and flaky benefit cost ratio. It's costs valuable money to be closed. So I've approved its opening from the 27th of November using the Lion 4 and X4 bus service and an EV charging station to try and reduce the shortfall in expenditure. Free bus travel across Wokingham Borough. Last week I approved free bus travel on Saturdays from the 18th of November and during December until the 23rd, and for Sunday the 26th of November for the Wokingham Winter Carnival, and Sunday the 3rd of December for the Woodley Christmas Extravaganza. This should be a great help for a lot of our residents. The free bus travel will help people who don't drive, prefer not to drive, or are struggling to afford their car at the moment, whether visiting friends and family, shopping, or getting to and from work. This is a great opportunity to take the bus and see what you've been missing. This all fits in with our objectives contained in our bus service improvement plan to grow patronage, and hopefully many residents will continue to use the bus in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Sarah Kerr.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Violence against women and girls is a fundamental human rights violation which harms the lives of millions. There will be hardly anyone in this chamber who is unaffected by this. I still remember the first time I was catcalled. My value as a person determined simply on how I looked. I was 12 years old, and since then I have had multiple experiences, from catcalling to being groped, stalked, and even attempted rape. We all have our own stories, but the common theme running through all of them is that men are the perpetrators and women are dehumanised, treated as objects. And this stops women and girls living the lives they would choose for themselves. It is not all men, and in fact it's not most men, but all men have a moral duty to be part of the solution. No more should we be requiring women to change their behaviours in order to avoid abuse and violence. We need men to actively call out misogynistic behaviours and toxic masculinity that are prevalent in society. those behaviours provide a platform to the minority of men who commit violence against women. So to ignore or excuse misogynistic behaviour only serves the perpetrators and puts women's lives at risk. The added benefit is tackling toxic masculinity also makes the lives of men and boys better as well. Never again should I have to hear my son being told to man up. In a little over a week's time, the 25th of November is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and the start of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. 25th of November is also White Ribbon Day. As this council chamber will be aware, White Ribbon is specifically about raising awareness of the role men play in eliminating violence against women and girls and is part of the wider Borg agenda. I am delighted to announce this evening that following our application to White Ribbon UK, Wokingham Borough Council is now White Ribbon accredited. This means that we've demonstrated to White Ribbon UK that we have the strategic buy-in and the governance framework in place to enable us to continuously work towards culture change. We have set up a steering group to lead on this vital work, which includes ambassadors and champions from across the organisation, including Councillors Hare and Councillor Croy. Thank you both for your commitment to this. I'd like to specifically mention and thank 3 members of our corporate leadership team, Matt Pope, George Framalico and Graham Ebers. Matt, George and Graham are taking it in turns to be the organisation's White Ribbon strategic leads, rotating on an annual basis, with Matt taking the lead for the first year. Having this kind of corporate level buy-in and leadership demonstrates the priority given to this important agenda, and I'd like to personally thank you. And finally, a huge thank you to Phil Stoneham, who has done all the groundwork to get us to this point. He's done a fantastic job. As we approach the 25th of November and the 16 days of activism, there will be a series of events across the borough, including a vigil in Wokingham Marketplace on 1st of December at 7 p.m. I urge everyone here this evening to get involved in some way. Silence only ever serves those that oppress, so do not be silent. Thank you.
The next section is statements from council-owned companies. I don't believe there are any, so we'll move on to the next section, which is motions. There is 30 minutes per motion. Pauline, are you going to move this motion?
Thank you. When I first started teaching...
Sorry, have you got a seconder as well?
Oh, yes.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Michael Firminger, thanks.
Yeah, when I first started teaching, my new head of department said I was like a dog with a bone when I wanted to achieve something. Well, this is take 4 on this motion, and I think the dog has finally got the bone. ULEZ, ultra low emission zone. It's a great idea in principle to try to prevent traffic from going into busy and overcrowded areas, creating queues and polluting the air. And we are all concerned about clean air and congestion. But ULEZ as a cure would have unintended consequences which would be worse than the malady, since its very purpose is to prevent people from driving into towns. Although for many years we've adopted policies to encourage people to walk, cycle and use buses, for many people their car is their only option. And if we were to impose ULEZ, it would put an additional strain on people's finances, especially those who have to come into work every day. There are already a number of things that are discouraging people from coming into our towns, such as the loss of banks, and we need to commit to doing nothing that would damage our town centres even more. We need to make it easier, not harder, for them to come in and use our shops, restaurants and cafes and businesses. There is no doubt it would dissuade people from using the town centres, whether they be people who can't or won't afford it, through to the youngsters who come in for evening or weekend jobs to make a bit of money. I know that the subject has not been suggested for any Wokingham towns, but it is already happening in some of our neighbouring places, such as Oxford. We're not as busy as Oxford, but the advent of ULEZ elsewhere is worrying people. And a number of residents have already asked me to reassure them that it will not happen in Wokingham. And passing this motion tonight will reassure them and flag up our support for businesses as well as our residents' pockets. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Does any member wish to speak against this motion? Councillor Craw.
Thank you very much. I have an amendment which I think Democratic Services have, and if that could be circulated now, that would be appreciated.
Have you got a seconder? Sorry. Paul, thank you. Are we going to distribute this as a document? Yeah. Can we? Sorry. No, not necessarily. I believe it's a small change, so we won't go for an adjournment unless there's any specific request for an adjournment.
Mr. Mayor, could I request a very small adjournment, please?
Yes, we can have a 5-minute adjournment.
5 minutes would be fine.
Can we start taking seats, please? Thank you. The next step in the process is Andy has 3 minutes to speak to the amendment.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry.
We would be happy to accept that amendment.
So if there's nobody against this, do we just go to a vote? Yeah. So Andy, you still have your 3 minutes.
I am, of course, always happy to take the advice of the mayor and land the monitoring. Okay, the deputy mayor, I'm sorry again, I'm sorry, is habit. Okay, so the reason I proposed the amendment, and I'm grateful for the support of my Lib Dem colleagues, is that once again, the Conservatives' initial reaction was an inability to distinguish between a measure designed to reduce congestion, the congestion charge, and a measure designed to improve public health, an ultra-low emission zone. It's very easy. The clue is in the name. A congestion charge aims to reduce congestion. A lower emissions zone aims to lower harmful emissions. No councillor in this room should be voting in support of harmful emissions, which is what the original motion would have implied. No councillor in this room should be voting for worse health outcomes for our residents. Famously, of course, the health impacts of dirty air have mostly fallen on the poor and the medically vulnerable. I propose the amendment as it needs to be clear that this council, all of us here, will always put the health of our residents first. And if it comes to a choice between shops and the health of the medically vulnerable, we will always side with the medically vulnerable. We will not be fettered by the shambolic flailings, well, it's the same thing, isn't it, of the Conservative Party lashing out in an ever more desperate culture war. Their fantasy war on motorists is one thing, their willingness to declare war on the health of our residents is another thing altogether. And the motion, as originally put forward, could not stand. We must always put the health of our residents first, and we must always make clear to our residents that we will put the health of their residents first. And I thank my Conservative colleagues for supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Paul Fishwick, speak. There's a second.
Yeah. Pauline, do you accept?
Paul Fishwick.
Paul Fishwick, sorry. No, I've got to ask Pauline if she accepts the motion. That's what it is in the script.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we do accept the amendment.
Yes, I know, but I'm following the script. Sorry.
Which Pauline are you talking to?
Behind. Sorry, not the Pauline in front.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, yes, we are willing to accept the amendment, and Councillor Croy's speech was totally unnecessary.
Okay, thank you for accepting that. Okay, so the seconder,
Which is Paul Fishwick.
which is Paul Fishwick, can speak on the motion
If he wants.
if he wants.
I was going to say, Deputy Mayor,
Okay.
as there's no opposition to this,
Sorry,
I would
apologies.
love to put my speech to the chamber, but as there's no opposition to this, I don't think we need to go through this.
Michael Firmager, please.
So no, I'm just really confused here, actually.
So am I.
I'm the seconder, but the seconder of the amendment actually gets a chance to speak. It's crazy. Sorry.
Yeah, because there's nobody against the substantive motion, we go straight to a vote, is my understanding. That's the advice I've just got. So we'll go with the latest advice. So all of those in favour of the substantive motion, which is the amended motion, please raise your hands. Thank you. Those against? Those abstaining? That's carried. Thank you very much. That is the end of the meeting.